When a person passes, we strive to remember them exactly as they were.
Lester was here the night he died. It was no tragic accident. We need to find Nicky Cacciamilio.
Oh, Lester, a man who seemed to have a heart of gold and filled with joy while serving as the doorman. But Lester appears to have a past that tied him to the mob, or at least to Nicky Cacciamilio, who pretended to be a mobster, as it appears appearances aren't as they seem. We open just 4 days after Oliver's beautiful, chaotic wedding as our favorite trio is gathered together, seemingly trying to enjoy some leftover shrimp. As Oliver is tearing apart the less than stellar obituary for the recently deceased Lester. Now, the official word was an accident, according to the police report, but come on, this is the murder building. Accident is practically code for future murder podcast material. Now, if I'm being honest, this sounds like there may be a cover-up going on early on this season. Knowing that we're dealing with the mafia and politicians based on what I saw from the trailer, it's safe to assume that maybe there will be more police corruption going on this time around this season. Howard, the ever-loyal friend and apparently a lonely one with Jonathan off on tour and his animals otherwise engaged, pops in looking to share some gossip. As Charles mentions the odd request by Lester to be laid and stayed in the lobby, and here's where things get really interesting. Howard brings up the security footage, and apparently, even against our trio's natural suspicions, it appears that Lester's death was indeed accidental. Now, we know our Mabel, 5 seasons in, she has that gut feeling, right? It's never wrong. She's not buying this accidental death for 1 second. But Oliver, on the other hand, he's fresh off his wedding, basking in the newlywed glow, and frankly, he's ready to put the murder podcast on pause if it means he gets more attention from his new wife. As Oliver's going on and on about wanting a normal life, and boom, Mabel and Charles point out, pun intended, that Oliver was just about to put someone's severed finger into his mouth, and just like that, we are back in action. Welcome back, everybody. I am just beyond excited to be covering this show for the 5th time, and it is crazy to think that I'm here covering this premiere episode of Season 5. Yes, Season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, Episode 1, titled Nail in the Coffin. There is so much to discuss about this episode, so go ahead and grab your red wine and your magnifying glass, and let's try to solve this season's murders. Full spoilers ahead. We see Mabel, the detective, instinctively snatching the finger, and a quick examination reveals a rather suspicious green fungus on the nail. As Charles, drawing on his vast cinematic knowledge, suggests it's a message like a horse head in a bed. And Oliver, ever dramatic, agrees, declaring it's a very mobby situation, this immediately sparking a memory for Mabel. Sophia Cacciamilio. Remember her, the mob wife they met in last season's finale who asked them to help find her missing husband Nicky? As Mabel fills Oliver in on the conversation she and Charles had with her, and after exchanging Marlon Brando impersonations, it's clear. First stop, confirm if the finger belongs to Lester as they go down to the lobby. The lobby is a whole new playground of characters. We meet Randall, the new doorman, who apparently played bass at Oliver's wedding and holds Lester's very detailed ledger. We also meet Lester's wife, Lorraine, for the very first time, but the real surprise is Mayor Tillman. He gives a speech despite not knowing Lester, but he loved him because he loves a great doorman. Now, it's clear as day that this is an early campaign stop for him for his upcoming election. I'm betting that the mayor is going to become a recurring thorn in our trio side this season, consistently trying to pull them into his political orbit, especially after Charles politely declined an endorsement request for the podcast. After what we found out from last season of the importance of this building and what's going on so far, it's very clear that the building feels like an epicenter for a major power vacuum, and I think the mayor wants in. Now, checking for a missing finger on Lester isn't easy, as his arms aren't positioned across his chest. Now, that leaves Charles tasked with the not-so-discreet retcon as he awkwardly tries to sneak a peek of if this missing finger belongs to Lester, all while Mabel and Oliver create a distraction. Now, in the conversation, Oliver learns that Lester apparently called him a cuckoo chick and also a taker, which has a meaning to what happens later with Oliver in this episode. Now, unfortunately, no fun Uma spots Charles' not so subtle inspection of Lester's hands, getting everyone's attention, which caused this mission to be failed. Now, back in Mabel's newly leveled up apartment, the trio regroup. Oliver, forgetting a picture for Lester's wake, pulls out a blurry photo from his wedding, and that's when Mabel catches it. She finds Lester speaking with no other than Nikki Cacciamilio at the wedding. But the thing is, Nikki was reported missing. It's never too early to jump to conclusions with our team, as their now working theory is that Lester was involved with the mob and got mixed up with the mob boss Nikki, and it led to his death, as this leads to a road trip to Staten Island to visit Sophia. Now, before heading out, Oliver isn't thrilled about messing with the mob again, as he talks about this tale that happened back in the 80s where he had to borrow $400 from the mob.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. It's a miracle he's not ass up in the East River. But now I am a newly wedded man with a ring finger to protect. So Oliver Putnam is staying put here.
But FOMO wins, and he joins them as they come face to face with the Cacciamilio family. As they pull up to a house from The Godfather, it's time to get some answers without pissing off the mob and not ending up like Lester. Now inside, they're introduced to Johnny, Tony, Mikey, Vinny, and Braylon as these mobsters tell a story about disrespecting the family, trying to intimidate our trio. Now, one of the brothers pulls out a gun, but it's all an act as we find out that they're just wannabes singing their podcast theme song, I'm Talking Here. Now, Sophia finally arrives home and drops a news flash, and that's that the mob is dead, and they have been dead for a while now.
The mob is dead. Why should we believe you?
Well, for one, if the mob was still alive, then why are my adult sons podcasting about mob activity in the 70s? Because that was the last time there was anything to talk about.
Nikki, she explains, wasn't involved in criminal activity with Lester. They were just the owners of Cleanups, the dry cleaning company in the building, the same one we've seen since season 1. As Nikki is apparently a failed mobster trying to keep it a secret. For now, Sophia claims the finger isn't her husband and sends the trio on their way. But not before a private conversation with Charles. Our man unleashes the Charles swagger, as Oliver calls it, and Sophia reveals they're on the verge of losing everything. And Charles, ever the hero, agrees to find Nikki, but under one condition. If Nikki killed Lester, the deal is off. As she hands him a deck of cards Nikki always carried with him, except for the day that he went missing. Now, later on in the evening in the elevator, Charles shares a moment with Oliver. As Charles explains that Oliver's got a new love, Mabel's got her whole life ahead of her, but Charles feels adrift, like something bad is coming.
You know when you have a Reuben at Katz's Deli and you don't get the heartburn, but you know it's coming?
Now, given his track record dodging death in this series, I'm hoping that Charles is safe, but the writers love to keep us guessing. Now, if you all have been following my breakdowns for a while, you all know that I have a theory that Charles has been targeted since the very beginning, and it is also very apparent since last season that that is true, that someone has been trying to kill Charles since the beginning of the show, and that is definitely one of the biggest mysteries I'm excited to figure out this season. Now back home, Charles investigates the cards, and one of them is magnetic and has a mysterious map on it with the number 62400 on it. Meanwhile, Mabel reviews the camera footage of Lester, noticing strange behavior and a missing chunk of footage around the crime scene. Now, the map they discover leads them through all the security camera blind spots, and following the path, they find a hidden door in a closet leading them to an underground tunnel, as this leads them into a secret casino. Now, the number 62400 is a code opening up another hidden compartment where they find an envelope, the one Nikki gave Lester at the wedding the night that he died. Now, while all this is happening, Oliver's still trying to prove he and Lester were pals despite Lester's wife's comments, as he decides to do a nice gesture, which is to pick up Lester's uniform from the dry cleaners and have the blood removed from his hat. As he makes his way into the cleaners, he discovers a dead body, and that dead body belongs to Nikki Cacciamilio. Another dead body found, and another case to solve in this new season of Only Murders in the Building.
I wasn't so sure about you when you started. You're really proving yourself. Take care of my building, Lester. It's yours now.
Since George left, Lester's been the heart and soul of the building and promised to keep it all together as well as protecting its tenants. As we venture into the past to see some familiar faces and see just how Lester got involved with Nikki. This episode really highlights just how good Lester was as a doorman, but more importantly, just how good of a person he really was. The episode is framed as a look back at Lester's time in the building and focused on his experiences as a doorman in New York, giving us a series of interviews with Lester himself, sharing his 32-year story. And what a story it is. Now, it's never revealed or addressed in this episode on who or why these interviews were taking place to begin with, but I do wonder if that filming crew of all the doorman, including Lester, if they'll play a role in this season and if they'll help our trio in solving Lester's potential murder. Now we are back breaking down the second episode of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, titled After You. As we continue to see the aftershock from Lester's death, episode 2 takes a brilliant, heartfelt detour. This isn't just a flashback episode, but instead it's a love letter to the heart and soul of the building itself. Now, there's a lot to discuss, so grab your box of tissues because the emotions were definitely there for this episode, and let's try to solve this season's murders. Full spoilers ahead. We learn that Lester never planned this life. He actually wanted to be a movie star. As we flash back to his first day, getting the rundown from the seasoned doorman by the name of George. Now, while on the elevator, in comes a familiar face, one that we haven't seen since season 2, and that's a younger Bunny, who's trying to get the lotto numbers to play from the new guy, and it was just nice to see her again, as well as the others that we see throughout this episode. Now, quick side note, I'm no mathematician, but I was a little confused on Lester's age in these flashbacks. Lester told Bunny in the elevator that he was born in 1948, and these flashbacks took place in the late 80s to early 90s. Now, that would mean that Lester is in his 40s, but the actor they chose in these earlier flashbacks didn't really look to be 40 to me, but again, maybe my math is completely off. Now, as I digress, George explains to Lester to always say to the tenants after you, hence the title of the episode, as it makes the tenants feel good. But the more important lesson here is George telling Lester to always pay attention to the little things. As George gives him the elevator crank, and he puts an emphasis on the importance of it because it's their responsibility to assure the safety of everyone in the building. Now, throughout the episode, we get these quick flashes to the night of Lester's death, and here we see him drop that same crank given to him 30 years prior while he's trying to get away from who I assume is our killer. Now, to go back to George talking to Lester about the importance of paying attention, to me it seemed like this was the writers talking to us as the audience to make the connections and to pay attention to the clues in this episode to who the killer or killers might be. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this episode treated us to a whirlwind tour of the building's history and its tenants. As some time passes, we meet baby Mabel and her mother Sylvia Mora visiting their aunt Salma Rodriguez, who we've yet to officially meet in the show and remains to be a big mystery of the show as well. Here we see a young Teddy who's already confirmed to play a role in this season based on the trailer. We get to see a younger Oliver before he moved into the building as he's trying to pull a fast one over on Lester as he pretends to slip on the floor as it's being mopped. We get to see the early days of this relationship between Oliver and Lester, as Oliver is being Oliver, as he kindly asks Lester to help him make the other applications for the apartment disappear, which we see Lester says that he'll see what he can do to help. Now, Lester doing this to me just confirms what was said in the previous episode and how Lester considered Oliver to be a taker, but this also proves that Lester has been looking out for him since they first met. Again, from seeing a younger Bunny to a younger Teddy and Oliver, that leads us to seeing a younger Charles who's at the peak of his Brazos fame. Taking a trip down memory lane has become a tradition for the show, but this episode just felt different than before. Now, George has Lester go outside to get rid of a person singing and making a disturbance in the courtyard. Now, little did Lester know this interaction would change his life forever as we're introduced to Lorraine, who we later know becomes his wife, as we get to look at their story of falling in love unfold over time. Now, question for you all. We see young Lorraine who's pushing a stroller and mentions taking these babies out for a walk because it makes it easier for them to go down for a nap. Now, my question is, are those babies in the stroller a young Frank and May who we know are the children of Lorraine and Lester, or was she just babysitting these random kids? If those babies were indeed Frank and May, that would indicate that Lester isn't their biological father, which leads me to wonder if their real father is still in the picture all these years later. But I think my question is answered a little bit later, but we'll get to that later in the breakdown. Now, more time passes, I would say maybe 6 or 7 years based on seeing Mabel as a kid now. Now we see that it is Christmas, where we meet the lady being pushed in a wheelchair, who you might have noticed from the opening credits of this episode, and we find out that it's Howard's mother, and we actually get to see a younger Howard as well in these sequences. As George yells at Mabel for being in his closet, which we now know was the entry to the hidden casino, as we see a kind Lester cheering her up by having her help out with the Christmas tree. It was really nice to see this relationship develop over time between Mabel and Lester, and watching her become his little helper around the building, this making Lester her first true friend. Again, it's the little details in this episode that I really got a kick out of, and it's just a fun backstory to see some of our favorite characters. For example, again, Oliver getting yelled at by Teddy about one of his plays that he's financing. We get to see Charles and Zaz, who also makes a cameo in this episode, talking about his chances of beating out Russell Crowe for the lead of Gladiator. All these little moments just truly put a smile on my face. But here's where things get interesting. Now for Christmas, we see Lester is gifted the official ledger, which we don't know who gifted it. I'm assuming it was his wife, but we see him getting that ledger, which we know is going to come to importance at some point in this season. Now during this, we cut to another future scene that we haven't seen in its entirety yet of our trio finding one of those pages from the ledger being ripped out. Again, I believe that whatever was written in this ledger will be key to finding out who our killer is. Now we see George collecting an envelope filled with money from a young Nikki as Lester sees this and he wants in. As more time passes, we cut to when the building's new automated elevators are installed as George pulls Lester aside. Now, Lester's afraid that the new elevators means that George won't need him anymore, but George lets him know that his job is secure and he wants to introduce him to someone new. And that person happens to be Nikki. To quickly address and clear up something I mentioned earlier, when Lester was thinking he was about to lose his job and he's talking to George and says, "Hey, I have kids now, so it's important for him to have this job," it seemed to me that answered my question about who those babies were in the stroller with Lorene, as it seems that they just had Frank and May. So whoever those babies were in that stroller weren't their kids. At least that's how I took that scene, just someone she was babysitting. Now, meeting Nikki is the big break that Lester's been waiting for, as George is retiring soon and Lester is going to be his replacements for 2 jobs now, one obviously being the doorman, but also working for Nikki. Now, working for Nikki isn't necessarily criminal activity, but it ain't legal either, as he's told to be a discreet doorman for Nikki's secret underground casino for Saturday nights. As he tells him, it's just easy money. Now, knowing what we learn later about how Nikki feels about people wanting to quit working for him, I do wonder why it was so what appears to be easy for George to retire and Nikki being so open to his new replacement. Which, speaking of George, I would assume that as time has passed on that he also has passed away, or is it possible that good old George is still alive and he may appear at some point later in the season? Now, I also suspect that we'll be getting more information about how Nikki came across and came about being connected to the casino underground, and also probably learning more about how long these illegal activities within the building has been happening. Remembering the conversation from the finale with Sophia saying to Charles that everything that happened in the building is all connected. As we watch Lester really coming into his own as the sole doorman of the building, we see him happily collecting money from Nikki, which I assume is what was found in the hidden compartment in the previous episode by Mabel and Charles in the casino. As more time passes, we see nice guy Lester giving Charles some kind words after losing another audition. We see him taking care of a creepy individual bothering the woman outside, and you'll take notice of the cards that we see Lester playing with, which will be important for later. Now, this time around, we get a major time jump to seeing Mabel now as an adult with her friends. Now, here's where we see yet another familiar face, and this one comes from season 1, as we remember the victim of season 1, and that is Tim, as he is seen with a new character played by Benny Feldstein, who appears to be friends of theirs. Now, I'm assuming that we're going to learn more about her at some point in this season, but it is interesting to know that she was friends with Tim and Mabel, and she wasn't at the funeral or helping out when he died, so she has to be important, and I would imagine she has some secrets that will be exposed at some point. Now at this point in the episode, we cut to the events closer to season 1 where Lester wants the night off to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Now Nikki declines his request because it's Saturday night and we know what that means, as Lester thinks it's time for him to retire working for him. But unfortunately, Nikki reminds him that he's the one responsible for paying for his kids' college and tells him that he won't leave until Nikki said so. Again, maybe because Lester is so kind, but Nikki wasn't so hard-pressed when George wanted to retire, which makes me think that maybe Lester was viewed to be more important than George, or maybe he was just better at his job. Now, even after being reminded that he's under Nikki's thumb, we see this episode continues to show us just how Lester was truly the building's core and always served the tenants well throughout their best and worst moments. From seeing him earlier cheering up a young Mabel who was hiding in the closet, to becoming her first true friend, to here we see him giving Oliver hope after his divorce, and later we see him comforting Howard when his mother passed. Again, these are just key examples of showing us that Lester was the ultimate nice guy. Now, earlier in an episode, it was revealed that Lester wanted to be an actor someday. So with that being said, he really looked up to Charles because he was the actor he wanted to become someday, but obviously that didn't happen. But speaking of Charles, in this scene, we see him get into an argument with a cab driver over a $400 tab, as we see Lester paying that tab when Charles didn't really have the money at the time because his show was canceled. Again, these flashes showcasing Lester's kindness just goes to show that he, to me, wasn't as appreciated as he should have been until he died, which is just kind of sad because it's just a reminder in our real lives to always to remember to show appreciation to those who show us kindness every day. Again, it's important to note that we pay attention to the little things in the small moments, especially with Lester and him with a deck of cards. Even in this scene with Charles, we see him giving him a deck of cards. Remember, the deck of cards Charles got from Sophia in last episode, she said that her husband always carried them on him, which to me means that we should keep that in mind for a potential clue. Now, cut to the night of Tim's murder, which led to Lester and Lorraine listening to the first episode of Only Murders podcast. As Lester is upset that one of his tenants was murdered on his watch in the building, but Lorraine tries to cheer him up by saying it's only been one murder in the last 30 years of him working there. But it seems like she spoke too soon, and maybe it was a bad omen as we get this montage showing all the previous murders over the past seasons, which makes it time for things to come full circle as Lester is now in George's position from 30 years back as we see him hire Randall for help around the building. We're now all caught up to where season 4 ended as it's time for Oliver's wedding. Like a young Lester, Randall has plans to making it big one day and making music, which explains why he played bass at Oliver's wedding. We watch as Lester gives him the same tips and advice that George gave him, as Lester warns Randall about avoiding Nikki at all costs, as he's trying to protect Randall from the trap that he fell into. As we come to a close of this episode, we see Lester finishing his story for the interview as we cut to seeing his dead body found in the fountain. As this hit me like a truck with the emotional attachment we now have after experiencing his life as a doorman. We cut to the opening scene of the previous episode of our trio discovering the police report that Lester's death was accidental. Now, this is where the show throws us for a loop because after all the murders in the building, could Lester's death just be a result of natural causes, or as the report suggests, maybe it was accidental? As we flash back to the night of Lester's death, where we see him appearing to be running away from someone mysterious. As he drops the important elevator crank, we see he looks up and grabs something in the water as it appears he either slipped or he was pushed into the fountain and he hit his head and we watch him bleed out. But wait, the final shot is a mysterious figure steps into frame, as we see a covered hand picked up the elevator crank that was dropped as they quietly walk away.
Wait, they don't look like mobsters. Those aren't mobsters. They're CEOs. They're all billionaires. This isn't the mob. This is the new mob of New York. Please tell me you recorded that.
So the billionaires are the new mob bosses of New York, and these billionaires could be our new suspects. Man, oh man, what an episode. This is what I like to call a good old-fashioned classic episode of Only Murders. It had the trio clicking on all cylinders with their incredible chemistry, the jokes were joking, the mystery was mystering, and the whole episode was just fantastic. Look, there's a lot to discuss about this third episode, so get out your ledgers because we got a murder to solve, full spoilers ahead. We kick things off with a fascinating history lesson about the iconic building. You see, back in the early 1910s, the rise of the automobile rendered the horse stables obsolete. But just a decade later, New York's mobsters, ever the entrepreneurs, found a more louder and more lucrative use of the space, and that was a secret casino. The decor, the fashion, it all changed over time, but one constant remained, and that is the shadowy, powerful presence of the mob. Cut to present day, and Charles, who always thought the Velvet Room was just a building rumor, he's now standing right in it. Meanwhile, upstairs, Oliver fills the crew in about the grim discovery of Nikki's dead body. A good old-fashioned cleaver to the chest seems to be the cause of death as of now, and in true Oliver fashion, he accidentally sneezes on the body, leaving a very unfortunate DNA sample on the mobster's corpse. What's a Broadway director to do with a contaminated dead body? Well, if you're Oliver, you put it in a laundry cart and you wheel it into Charles's apartment, much to Mabel and Charles's utter shock. Oliver claims he blacked out after the sneeze and thought bringing the body to Charles's was the best plan. Now, back in my breakdown of episode 1, I stated that I believe that Randall would die at some point this season because of the trailer showing someone who I thought was his body in this laundry cart, but that was all cleared up in this scene, and I'm glad that he's alive, and hopefully he survives this season because I'm starting to come around to Randall as Lester's replacement. Now, Mabel instantly pieces together that whoever killed Nicky probably anticipated his body wouldn't be found until the morning. But her more pressing question is, why is Nicky's body so discolored? He looks to have been dead for a while, as our trio's immediate mission is to get Oliver's DNA off of Nicky's body and return the body to the cleaners before it opens in the morning. Now, it's interesting to think that whoever murdered Nicky wanted his body to be found, but wanted his body to be found at the dry cleaners. Could this be sending a message? Whoever did this could be saying that the business was dying, a literal dying business, so they literally let Nicky's dead body be their way to point that out. Like I stated in my episode 1 breakdown, I believe that the laundry business is being used as a front and was being used to do more than laundry, and that is laundering money for the casino. Now, as the trio meticulously check Nicky for missing fingers, which he has all 10 of them, they notice something green under his nails. It's the exact same color as the material found on the missing finger from episode 1. Now, Charles, with his surprising knowledge, identifies it as an F1 grade Lachlan felt, the kind used on the dealer's table in the Velvet Room. Now, this sparked a theory I have. A good felt helps with the toss of the cards, so did Nicky mess with the felt to cheat, assuring he won or that someone else could have lost? Did he scam the wrong person at the poker table and pay the ultimate price? To me, this feels like a huge piece of the puzzle. Now, talk about an internal struggle, Charles's existential crisis continues. Now, Nicky, or rather this somewhat ghost version of Nicky, starts chatting with Charles about his impending lonely death. These eerie conversations persist throughout this episode, and it's not new to Charles to have these odd conversations with the dead, but this season, it feels like death is truly closing in on him. Now, we know that Charles has escaped death throughout this entire series many times, but this time around, it feels more personal. Now, the trio tries to pinpoint Nicky's time of death and initially think that it might align with Lester's murder about a week ago, but the gardenia hasn't welted, suggesting a more recent demise. Now, the trio decides to take their murder solving to another level as they conduct their very first autopsy. Now, we know our trios are no experts, so determining the rigor mortis or the exact time of death isn't working out so easily for them. However, Mabel spots a white substance on his sleeve, and Oliver, our self-proclaimed cocaine expert, confidently declares that it's not. Maybe it's a paint substance. Another mystery for now, as they also notice rope marks on his wrist and a particular burn behind his ear. Now, taking a look at our murder board so far, and it's looking a little bit rough, not a lot to go off of, but hey, it's still early in the game. Now, with no real breakthroughs, Oliver suggests a dinner break, eyeing some leftover Chinese food. Now, as they wait for the leftover Chinese food to warm up, we see Oliver looks over the last text message he sent over to Lester, and they are very demanding. Now this comes back into play later in this episode as Oliver attempts to do right by Randall, the new doorman. With no time to talk more about Oliver's narcissistic ways, as the suggestion to eat leftover freezer food gave Mabel the breakthrough they were looking for. What if the burns behind Nikki's ears was actually from a freezer? That actually would explain his discoloration and lack of decomposition. Is most likely that he was killed days ago, frozen, and is only now thawing. As Mabel checks his mouth and finds a critical clue, a piece of paper with the building's logo on it, which, based on episode 2 flashes, we know it came from Lester's ledger, as confirmed later in this episode. Now let's think about this in my connection with my theory about the felt. The person could have found out that Nikki screwed them over by discovering the ledger and how the numbers show that they've been manipulated for a very long time. So could they have confronted Nikki and in the heat of the moment they shoved the paper in Nikki's mouth, they put a cleaver in his chest and murdered him? Right now, again, this is just a working theory, of course. Now, they say time flies when you're doing your first amateur autopsy, as it's now morning with only 14 minutes left to ditch the body at the cleaners. Now, en route, they confirm the paper is indeed from Lester's ledger, and they need the ledger from Randall, and Oliver, in the purest Oliver form, he just snatches it out of his hands and runs. Now this leaves Mabel and Charles to deal with the body, as Mabel bumps into V, formerly known as Althea, her friend we briefly saw in episode 2. V is now a musical artist who has recently bought the penthouse in the building. A bit like a deflating balloon, V manages to bring Mabel's confidence back to earth, asking if she still lives with her aunt. As Mabel proudly corrects her, stating that she has her own place in the building and has her own podcast. Now, V had no idea, and she finds her podcast at the 17th spot, leaving Mabel feeling a bit bummed comparing their lives. Now, this obviously gives us context to the flashback we seen in episode 2, and we'll find out later that their relationship ended badly, and that V brings out the worst in Mabel. Now, my question is, where has V been all these years, and what really happened between them? Now, I do find it odd that Mabel didn't know that her friend from the past is now some mega pop star, which makes me wonder if her name to fame is more recent. Could the new name change and her rise to fame be backed by some billionaires? Maybe one of them that we'll meet later. Meanwhile, we watch as Charles, in what I assume to be a camera-free zone of the cleaners, he clumsily tries to put Nikki's body back without leaving his own DNA everywhere. Now, dead Nikki recites Pablo Neruda's Death Alone to Charles, and just as he finishes, the police arrive. Now, it's clear that they were purposefully sent here to the cleaners to find the body. Now, one officer tells the other, just write it up like they said. Now, they, is that being used as pronouns, or are they referring to powerful people, perhaps the mob, who have the police in their pockets? Looks like my crooked police being involved and it being a cover-up back in my episode 1 breakdown is coming true, which now puts into question Lester's accidental death police report and maybe someone messing with the camera footage. Now, back in Mabel's apartment, the bad blood between her and V is confirmed, but the ledger holds more immediate answers. The missing page shows money accounts, poker names, and code names of birds, as they quickly realized Lester was keeping tabs on the high-stakes game. And guess what? A game is happening tonight. Now let's go back and talk about those bird names, which I think will be important to maybe identify characters that we may have met or haven't met so far this season. So we have here the brown-headed cowbirds, which are said to be parasites and killers of born and unborn baby birds. They're also said to be brood parasites that lays their eggs in nests of other birds. So let's say this is someone with a personality type of someone that's maybe abrasive and rude and just does what they want. We have the Eurasian jay, who is said to be able to imitate other birds and sounds. So let's keep an eye out for someone that can imitate people. We have the kakapo bird, which is very rare. There's only a total of 244 of them as of 2024. They're also said to be the heaviest living species of parrots in the world. So let's keep an eye out for someone that maybe looks pretty unique and also maybe heavyset. And last but not least, we have the bowerbirds. They're renowned for the unique courtship behavior where males build a structure and they decorate it with sticks and brightly colored objects and attempt to attract a mate. So to me, this sounds like someone that's eye candy, that's very attractive, and they like to attract people to them. So now with that in mind, was one or all 4 of these people named after birds responsible for Nikki's death? Now, continuing that same thought, did they chase after Lester to get the detailed notes from his ledger? Now, we watch as Oliver has this touching moment of growth and remorse for taking Lester for granted as he returns the ledger back to Randall. We see Oliver cheers Randall up, who's worried the building will fall apart without Lester and without completing his training, as Oliver tells Randall to forge his own path, to be his own person and not try to fill the shoes of Lester. As Oliver promises to help him with his training, but first he has to take a nap before the big spy mission. Now, before the nap, we see Charles making a mysterious call. As he goes under the code name General Custer, an anonymous patient in some trial group receiving unknown doses of something. Now look, I've been covering this show for years, since the very beginning, and I don't recall this detail about Charles. What are these doses and how long has Charles been taking them, and what is he taking them for? Is our beloved Charles secretly sick? Could this be some major reveal some point this season and some ongoing dance that he has with morality? Now, as we come to a close of this episode, it is now mission time as we end with our trio behind the bar, and in come some new players, the new mob of New York. Here we meet Sebastian Steed, aka Bash, a tech billionaire CEO. We have young billionaire Jay Flug, who's in the pharmaceutical business. And last but not least, Camilla White, a hotel empire titan. These are the new power players, the modern mob. But wait, we have one more little spicy nugget before we end, and that is they notice Jay has a bandage on his hand and he's missing a finger. Likely the very same finger the trio found with the shrimp in episode 1.
They just write a check.
No one writes checks anymore.
We already have some ideas about who has a partial hand in these two deaths, so don't miss season 5.
This is so good.
That's right, Mabel. This episode was pretty damn good. We learn about the missing finger, we meet a new robot named Lester, and we get a dinner party with no food, by the way, but who needs food when you're in the company of billionaires who make things very interesting in this episode? And spoiler alert, I thought this episode was brilliant. With that said, let's chop up some food and get into this episode and try to solve this murder mystery. Spoilers ahead. We kick things off with a glimpse into the world of our billionaire suspects. As they bask in the glow of their past victories, those little morally ambiguous stepping stones that pave the way for their wealth. You know, the kind of wins that make you wonder at what cost. Now, back in the Velvet Room, the billionaires are reading the room only to find it utterly empty. They note that the new norm of social mingling has gone right out of the window recently, a subtle nod to the chaos swirling around the building. And speaking of chaos, our beloved Only Murders crew almost gets busted trying to sneak around, but thankfully they manage to vanish without a trace. Now, a quick detail that you might have missed in the opening credits. Did you all spot the 3 birds sitting on the window? This being a callback to Lester's ledger in our episode 3 breakdown. The brown-headed cowbird, the cockabo, and the Eurasian jay all come back into play into this episode. Now, Mabel and Charles talk about the coincidence that Jay is missing a finger, and that finger is most likely one they found back in episode 1, and at the very least, he's a suspect or involved. Now, they mention the cleaver that was found in Nikki's chest could have been used in cutting off the finger, and Charles mentions how Lester could have seen the whole thing, and that being what led to his death. Now, this conversation is cut short because Mabel and Charles are introduced to the new doorman, a robot by the name of Lester. Now, Howard's been tasked with training this new doorman robot, and we all know that this will make the robot filled with gossip and rumors taken after his trainer. As Randall sets the record straight, he's not being replaced by a robot. Its only duties are to handle deliveries and or reminders. Now, speaking of this new robot, I will say if they're playing with the idea of artificial intelligence and the show making a commentary about that, maybe this Lester robot can be useful at some point in the season and help figure out who is the murderer. Lester the robot says that he just needs to scan everyone's eyes and fingerprints to keep them in the database. Let's keep that in mind in our own memory banks to possibly call back to at some point this season. As Charles and Maple go to Oliver's, they welcome back Vince, who's got his 2 eyes now. Vince and Lester were birding buddies, so he can decode Lester's ledger to figure out which birds were playing cards, a really smart call by Oliver to get Vince involved. As we take a look at our very first Oliver Putnam murder board, motivated after being called a self-centered narcissist by Charles in last week's episode.
So, last night as I lay there thinking about myself, the strangest thing happened. I thought about you. You always make the murder boards. So I thought to myself, I'll do it for you. Bravo, Oliver, bravo.
And on this board, we have our prime suspects, the billionaires linked to their feathered alter egos. Now, Jay is listed as the Eurasian bird. We have Bash as the kakapo, and Camille as the brower bird, and Nikki as the brown-headed cowbird. Now, per Lester's recent notes, while the gaming parlor was normally filled with people, aka birds, last Saturday there were only 5. Now, if we account for Nikki and the 3 billionaires, which equals 4, who was the 5th person? Now, here's where we learn about some of these billionaires' evil deeds. Now, we find out that Jay's family faucet business once gave everyone lead poisoning. They then conveniently made the cure for it. Talk about true mob-like supply and demand. Now, Bash is a technology genius whom age is unknown, which was a funny running joke throughout this episode. And he's been around for a very long time, and he basically owns the internet, which makes you think that he can control anything people see and read online. He can also probably manipulate camera footage. Now, Camilla, the queen of the court, known for making beautiful nests, sounds harmless, right? Well, we'll see about that a little bit later in this episode. Now, the trio's immediate plan is to get to Jay and confirm the missing finger. Now, before diving headfirst into the J plan, our trio drops a teaser for season 5 of Only Murders in the Building podcast, making some not so subtle nods about the billionaire's possible involvement. But before moving on, we have to talk about what I consider to be one of the funniest moments of this episode. As Mabel and Oliver run into Thee in the hallway just as Howard and the robot Lester appear. Now, Lester scans Thee, and her latest hit song starts playing, prompting our favorite nosy neighbor to busting out some truly unforgettable dance moves. The side eyes and the faces Mabel made in this scene had me in stitches. And this is something I've always loved about the show, when they get meta talking about things about the show and how things are reviewed and so on and so forth. We have this moment here where Robot Lester hilariously mentions how season 4 of the podcast was 24% lower than last season. And the whole sluts joke and being down your throat more, all these comments to me in this scene was just pure comedy gold. But putting the jokes aside for a second, Thee suggests to Mabel and Oliver that they need her publicist. She mentions that he's intuitive, he's a psychic, and he also, as she puts it,
and he's a hired assassin. But you did not hear that from me, okay? Bye, Howard.
I'm sorry, what? A hired assassin? Was she just joking around, or did she just drop a massive clue about our potential killer? Again, I've said this before, but there definitely has to be more to this character, Thee, more than just being Mabel's old friend that she has beef with. And if she isn't like directly a part of the murder plot, I wouldn't be surprised if she's secretly jealous of Mabel, and it's not the other way around as it's been presented so far in the story. Now, after that hilarious interaction, Mabel brings up a great point. How shocking is it that they don't have a major sponsor for their podcast after getting a whole movie made about them? As she's now motivated to get one, especially after lying to Thee about already having one. This fresh desire to prove something to Althea sparks a deep dive into Mabel's past relationship with her. As we find out, they were each other's only friends in middle school. Mabel back then was much more sunnier, she was much more happier, but after Zoe's death, she fell into a deep depression, which explains the less sunny Mabel we met back in season 1. Not long after, Althea completely changed, turning everyone against Mabel, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, unfortunately, Mabel's emotional trauma dump is cut short by a video message from Jay.
Hey, podcasters, heard your teaser. Sounds like you have some thoughts. I'll be by at 7 to clear things up.
An invitation to dinner with a billionaire. As it is dinner time with a billionaire, we see Jay arrives earlier than expected, and soon after, Camilla and Bash, they both arrive, and now our trio isn't just hosting one billionaire, but now 3. 3 incredibly wealthy, incredibly self-centered, and incredibly suspicious individuals, all potentially involved in Nikki's murder. As we find out, these 3 billionaires are only here for one reason.
No. I'm here because they're investigating you. Naturally, I've been having you followed. I knew you tried to pin it on me.
Thanks for your robot-like honesty.
Now look, I don't want to speak too soon, but this brief interaction with our three big actors this season is already one of my favorites in the entire series. Also, doesn't hurt that there are 4 Oscars between Christoph Waltz and Renee Zellweger. As the talent this show continues to pull in is literally insane, I'm starting to think that this show is actually run by the mob. Now, as they put it to our trio, the 3 of them are here for one reason and one reason only.
We're all here for one reason, yes? Yes, to give you the opportunity to keep us out of your podcast before we sue you for libel.
Libel, wow. That's just turned down the temp a tad.
Now, Mabel smartly turns the tables on them by mentioning how they were sniffing around the murder scene as they bring up, well, it's not a part of the building where they found Nikki, but Charles says technically it was a part of the building and that's why they're looking into the murders. Now, the billionaires don't want their names tied to the secret card games and mobsters, which makes sense, as the back and forth in this scene was spectacular. However, our trio makes a rookie mistake. They mistakenly mention details about Nikki's dead body, details they should not have known. You could see it on their faces. They weren't prepared for this level of interrogation back on them, and they're losing this battle against the other group. But the trio is nothing if not resilient, as we watch them pivot, deciding to split them up. Mabel will be talking to Jay, Charles will be talking to Bash, and Oliver to Camilla. I could honestly watch this episode for hours just for these individual interactions. It was like watching a masterclass in character dynamics. Alright, so first up, we have the awkward bonding between Charles and Bash. We see Bash giving Charles some tips about how to stay young, but more importantly, we see Bash using his cutting-edge technology to save Charles's grandmother's legendary recipe. Then we cut over to Oliver and Camilla, who low-key is making sneaky insults about Oliver's apartment's decor. You can feel Oliver's ego taking a hit, but he tries to play it cool. And finally, Mabel and Jay, which, by the way, they were definitely flirting in this scene. As Jay talks about his trust issues, being betrayed by one of his close friends, and needing to prove himself to others. Does that sound a little familiar? Very familiar to Mabel's own story she shared earlier about her and her old friend. This mirroring right here was so smart to me in the writing, as Jay also claims that he lost his finger making a bad decision, but he wouldn't go into detail. After this interaction, Mabel tells the rest of the crew that she doesn't believe Jay is the murderer because he's sweeter than she expected. Again, I can't stress enough how smart I thought the writing was in this episode. These billionaires in our trio, while different on the surface and also different in their bank accounts, actually share a lot in common, or at least that's what the scene made me think. I'm just sitting here watching this scene thinking, oh man, maybe the billionaires are just misunderstood. Maybe they're not so bad. But I guess the joke's on me because they are quite charming, which made the twist that comes later so much better. As the story about what happened to Jay's finger is finally revealed, as Camille tells Oliver,
What happened to Jay's finger?
Fine. The night Lester died, Nikki showed up with this cleaver.
Now, the story goes, Nikki was apparently high on Snow White, and Nikki chopped off Jay's finger after going crazy, and that explains why they were in the Velvet Room, looking for Jay's finger. They all have the same story, but the question is, can we really trust these billionaires? Well, as of right now, our trio does, case closed. But the most shocking moment in this scene was we see Camilla has her people come into Oliver's dining room and completely remodel it without anyone noticing.
She's a home decor witch!
Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we see our trio eating the dinner that Charles and Bash made, and they're comparing notes about their time with the billionaires, and again, they're all just surprised by how well it went. Now, speaking of surprises, we see Mabel getting a message super late in the evening from WandaFi about signing their podcast. What a coincidence, right? Their podcast just became a hot commodity just as they're poking around some high-end billionaires. Next morning, as they arrive to the meeting with WandaFi, they get the lay of the land, they see their new super sleek studio space, everything is going great, they're on top of the world. But then Mabel noticed something isn't right. She notices the missing finger wasn't Jay's and he lied about the whole thing, as our trio is ready to record the truth about them, but there are restrictions to the new podcast in the contract they just signed without fully reading it. The contract explicitly states that the creators are prohibited from discussing the management of the company because it's a conflict of interest with the new recent stakeholders. And those stakeholders are Jay, Camilla, and Bash. As this new deal that our trio just signed, which is 3 years by the way, they cannot talk about their new bosses who are now their prime suspects. Talk about a well-played game that our trio never knew they were actually in.
Okay, let me be very, very clear with you right now. Hear me when I tell you, I would not go in there. Turn around now.
Charles, is that Sophia's minivan?
But you have to ask yourself, who would want the money that bad to kill those dudes?
Their wives.
Could it be true that the people Nikki and Lester trusted the most are the ones responsible for their deaths? Well, I doubt that, but I do think they are more powerful than we think. Welcome back to my channel, everybody, where today we'll be discussing episode 5 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, which was titled Tongue Tied. This episode had that old classic charm of the show in which we spend most of the time with some odd characters around the building, all while Charles attempts to get his groove back and show Sophia that he can do more than talk with his mouth. Yeah, that was kind of gross, but anyway, we've got some garbage from Miller to look through as we try to solve this case and break down this episode. Full spoilers ahead. So if you all know me, you know I've been a Detective Williams stan since day one. So you can imagine my level of excitement when we open this episode with her voiceover describing what it truly means to have real money and what it buys, and that, my friends, is silence. As our trio takes Detective Williams on the grand tour of the now infamous Velvet Room. But hold on, something is seriously off. The money in the hidden compartment of the table is now gone. The blood and the markings from Nikki's potential cleaver attack and the dents in the wood are also gone, as it appears that everything has been totally repaired. Williams suggests it's all been wiped clean, evidence meticulously removed, as her theory is that someone's been paid by the billionaires to clean up their messes, and they most likely live right in the building. Now, when she said that, my mind immediately jumped to two possibilities. Could it be Lester the robot quietly doing actual dirty work without Howard's permission? Or maybe Camilla's silent ninja team who just remodeled Oliver's dining room but are actually covert crime scene cleaners. Either way, it appears that someone's got some good skills and a very good vacuum. Now, Charles shows Detective Williams pictures of those shady cops sent by someone to report on Nikki's dead body. But Williams doesn't recognize them and isn't too concerned about finding them because of the last time someone in her department snitched, they ended up in Florida. As we see, Charles is happy to volunteer his time to visit Sophia for more answers. Meanwhile, Oliver discovers a shrimp tail lying underneath one of the tables and immediately believes it's from the shrimp he ordered for his wedding where the unidentified finger was found. Now, back at Charles's, the great shrimp debate is put on hold as both Mabel and Oliver discover that Charles isn't just looking for clues, he's also looking for love. Or at least some senior companionship on the dating app called Last Gasp, which I just thought was hilarious. As Mabel and Oliver are off to question the building staff, Oliver stays behind because he notices that Charles is acting weird. Charles doesn't want Mabel to know, but he tells Oliver about that mysterious trial that Charles signed up for back a few episodes ago. Well, it turns out it was for a testosterone trial designed to build bone strength, intensify his energy, and basically make him feel young again. Which makes sense because Charles has had a bit of an obsession with feeling young throughout this season so far. Now, this doesn't come without its side effects, as he says he has this consistent taste of pennies in his mouth, and now he's got cats following him around everywhere he goes. And to prove just how effective this new trial is, we see super strong Charles casually picks Oliver up, demonstrating his newfound strength. So going back to talking about this new dating app, I do wonder if it'll play into the story of this season. Will we see Charles finding true love or only find someone to make love to? Also, this newfound energy, I wonder if that will play into Charles' story arc this season. Will there be more dangerous side effects that pop up in the most unexpected moment? Now, with Charles off investigating Sophia, Mabel and Oliver head down to the building staff level. Their mission is to find if anyone within the building wiped the Velvet Room clean. They first run into Randall, who is clueless about the whole thing. But then Howard swoops in and continues to make Randall feel obsolete because the new gossip bot Lester has been busy lately, dropping off the residents' prescriptions and genuinely taking over everything. Mabel and Oliver then spot a familiar face that we haven't seen in a very long time, and that's the face of Ursula, the building manager in our favorite gut milk cellar. They follow her, hoping that she's got some secrets to tell. Now, Ursula doesn't dish out information for free. You want intel, you gotta pay for her new and improved gut milk. Now, Oliver does pay up the money, but Ursula's intel isn't a lot. But she does provide a name, and that name is Tommy the Tongue. As she says, the only person known to do service work in that room. But before they head off, Ursula shares a piece of her mind, telling the duo that they are responsible for the beginning of the end of the building that was once peaceful. Now, that last part of the conversation to me was directly tied to Oliver in this episode feeling that maybe it's time to move out of the building. Now, Ursula also mentions how the residents have been moving out lately, which we know because of the murders, which makes sense, but it does also possibly hint at some foreshadowing that Oliver may decide to move out by season's end, but also it seems to have ties into the unknown killer that's been hinted at from the start of this show that has not been found out yet. Now, Ursula also suggested that the only service team allowed in that room would be Tommy's Tongue. We later find out who and what Tommy is, which is a company, but is it a company that's a secretly owned cleaning company by both Lorraine and Sophia? More on that a little bit later. Next stop is Gary the Trash Man, except Gary's no longer there. Instead, they meet Gary's replacement of 3 years, and that's an interesting new character by the name of Miller. And let me tell you, Miller's got dirt on everyone. He even drops the news that Oliver got an offer on his place, a juicy tidbit Oliver hadn't told anyone about. Now, unfortunately, this pit stop offers no promising information about Tommy the Tongue. In fact, Miller kicks them out for the mere mention of that name. Now, Miller will come back later in this episode, as we'll see, but I have a feeling that Miller will definitely come back into play later this season as well. A man in his position has got a lot of dirt on everyone who's ever thrown anything away of importance in the last 3 years, including the days leading up to and on the day of Lester's and Nikki's death. Now, speaking of tongue, let's check in with Charles. He meets Sophia at a lively hibachi restaurant, given the strict instructions to question her about Tommy the Tongue, and more importantly, to keep this meeting professional, aka keep his tongue in his mouth and not in Sophia's. Now, Charles learns this is a family affair as Sophia's brought her boys, who one of them is celebrating their 36th birthday. Now, we also get another unexpected surprise, and that is Mayor Tillman, who yet again offers himself as a guest on the podcast. Man, this man is pretty persistent. So a couple things I want to mention. One is this mayor popping up to me doesn't feel like a coincidence. So I wonder, was he there to meet someone of importance, or is he spying on Charles or Sophia because he's only interacted with Charles so far out of the trio? Also, him wanting to be on the podcast so bad has to have some type of purpose besides him maybe promoting his upcoming election. Another thing I want to throw out there, we know Sophia is connected to the Tommy company later, but I'm wondering if her seamlessly goofy sons are involved as well. Maybe she hired them for pity and wanted them to be actual adults. I could see them being on the job to clean up that room and they missed the shrimp on the floor, but I could also see them stealing that tray of shrimp from Oliver's wedding. And to go even further, it wouldn't surprise me if one of them is missing a finger because they were probably horsing around while they were cleaning the room. What do you all think? Am I possibly onto something there, that the boys were actually the cleanup crew in the room and one of their fingers was missing? Now, back to the semi-interrogation / semi-date, Sophia claims that she wasn't aware of her husband's involvement in the Velvet Room, but instead she's more interested in Charles and curious about his mouth work. She's clearly lying in my opinion, but Charles's mind isn't exactly in the right place. Now, after a quick game of hibachi catch, we see Sophia plays the recently widowed wife and fan fatale really well here. She shares how when they first married, Nicky was more of a shy poet versus the mobster he pretended to be. But after a while, Nicky put the poems behind him, and apparently Sophia's mother forced him to lean more into the lifestyle of a mobster, and he began to lie and cheat on Sophia. Now, Charles mentions how his mother wasn't the best parent either, and this shared experience with their mothers leads to Sophia kissing Charles, and we see them heading back to her minivan for dessert. Alright, let me share with you all a crazy theory that I have. Now, Sophia mentioned how her mother was the one who pointed her towards marrying a brute and someone in the mafia. Could it be that Sophia's mother is the real brains behind this whole operation? Now, I also have another wild theory, but I'm going to save that for the end of this breakdown. Trust me, it's a bit of a doozy. Now, back with our dynamic duo Mabel and Oliver, we see them doing some clue hunting in the staff locker room. Now, putting the mystery aside for a moment, we see Mabel hits us with a real emotional moment here. Mabel shares her concerns about the possibility of Oliver moving out of the building, which has been on the table since marrying Loretta. Mabel pleads for Oliver not to move, but he assures Mabel that he's not going anywhere anytime soon. Now, back to the mystery, they notice that someone has carved out the words Oliver sucks, which to me only adds to him not feeling welcome anymore, but then they find this carving which says die Lester die, and behind them is a staff looking very ominous. Now, thankfully, Randall clears the air. The Lester written on the table wasn't our now dead human Lester. Instead, it was in reference to Lester the robot. He carved that because the robot showed up on his first full week of being the new doorman. And obviously that plays into the conversation about the robots taking over, and this is where the real staff drama begins. They admit that they're terrified of losing their jobs to these soulless machines, and they feel like the residents, who used to feel like family, don't really care or have their backs anymore. Now, Oliver sees this as an opportunity as he cleverly jumps on this anti-robot bandwagon, hoping this newfound grouping will lead to them to finding some information about Tommy the Tongue. Now, next morning, the Rise Against the Machines officially kicks off. A building meeting is called, and Oliver's plan to build trust is in full swing. But first, Howard's masterwork, Lester the Robot, now has uploaded all the residents' information, creating a ranking. Mabel clocks in at an impressive 4th place, while Oliver, on the other hand, is placed at 237th, but we all know our trio is number 1 in our hearts. Now, I'm thinking this new ranking feeds into my theory that I had last week, where I thought that Lester the Robot would be key in the investigation. Now having all the residents in a database would definitely be important, or so I thought. Oliver kicks off the very first Arconia Con, sadly with no snacks included, and tries to advocate for the staff, explaining why robot replacement is a terrible idea. But the residents, on the other hand, they like the robot because it means no personal contact, no small talk, and no tips. Now, I feel like this is the show's way of sharing how they feel about the uprise within the real world with the use of AI, especially within Hollywood. Now, the tension builds to a boiling point and leads to Ursula dropping the ultimatum: either the robot goes or they all will quit. And then all of a sudden, the temperature changes and the staff turns on Oliver and accuses the trio of turning the building into now known as the murder building. Again, another painful reminder of why Oliver might actually want to move. It only feels like Mabel and Charles are the only ones that have his back in the building. Speaking of, Charles walks in after his night with Sophia and comes in making a scene and also has the walk of shame. Now, after Oliver calls a brief commotion, amidst all this, Lester the Robot disappears. Now, before this happened, we can briefly see Miller and some of the staff members walking up behind Lester just before he vanishes, heavily implying that they were the ones that took it. Now, back at Charles's, he spills a little tea about his night with Sophia with Mabel, but she doesn't want to hear this because she's upset with him because he didn't keep his promise by keeping things professional. Slut shaming aside, Charles didn't get any information on Tommy, and after wishing they could just ask now dead Lester who Tommy is, a light bulb goes off for Mabel. She comes up with the idea of simply asking Lester the Robot. But first, they have to find the robot, right? Well, just as she says that, we see Lester the Robot mid-air falling to its death on the ground. Man, my entire Lester the Robot theory is now gone. What a poetic, tragic end. We now have 2 dead doormen with the same name within the last 2 weeks, both found dead at the fountain. As we see Howard mourning the robot Lester, but not for long, as a new robot is going to be delivered soon, which means my theory of the robot being important to the investigation still lives on. Now, as we come to the end of this episode, Miller confesses to destroying the robot and wanting to thank Oliver with a gift. It's a bizarre garbage portrait of Lester made from actual garbage from the night of Lester's death. Kinda gross, but soon will be a huge clue. As Miller leaves, he gives Oliver back the discarded offer on his apartment, and Mabel sees this. Meanwhile, Charles realizes he's lost his phone. Oliver immediately suggests Sophia, and this is huge because it has their murder board on it, but also Nikki's dead body. Thank goodness Mabel has Find My iPhone on as they go after Charles's phone that is currently on the move. As they track the phone, Mabel confronts Oliver about the offer, and he still insists that he's just thinking about it and just entertaining the idea. Now, during this, Charles finds an invoice from Lester's death night, all made out to Tommy with an address, the very same address Sophia is headed to. As Detective Williams calls with information on Tommy, here's the kicker. It's not a person, but a massive company that all its money was withdrawn that morning, but there's no name attached to the withdrawal, only an address. And guess what? It's the same address our trio is headed to. Now, before I forget, Oliver says that he knows a shortcut, and that's because he grew up on Flatbush, which is new information. Now, you know who also grew up there? Lester. Coincidence or another layer to this mystery? Now, despite William's stern warning to stay away from these individuals who pose a threat, our trio ignore her. As they arrive to the address and watch as Sophia is not only let into the building, but welcomed by Lorraine. That's right, Lester's wife. Are the wives of both the victims, Lester and Nikki, the ones responsible for their deaths?
My whole life, I've only really felt like myself in two places. Being back here today, I finally understand why I'm so afraid to leave the Arconia.
Sometimes going back to a place you knew when you were a kid can open up old wounds, or it can provide you with clarity that can help you move forward as an adult. As we see that here with Oliver in this week's episode. Welcome back to my channel, where today we'll be discussing and breaking down episode 6 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, which was titled Flatbush. This episode saw the return of Loretta, whose place burnt down on accident or on purpose. We learn more about the relationship between Lorraine and Sophia, and our infamous missing finger goes missing, and a theory that I shared with you all a couple weeks ago comes back into fruition. Now, we've got some childhood trauma to get through and a tech billionaire to question as we try to solve this case and break down this episode. Full spoilers ahead. We open with a small tour of Lorraine's house as she's listening to Marie Callas and looking at pictures of her and Lester. Now, during this, we have the voiceover from Loretta talking about what makes a home. Now, this is cut with Sophia, who's trying to get her yoga or meditation on, also listening to Marie Callas, but as she's doing this, she's getting dried pistachios thrown at her by her mother-in-law. Now, is this stereotypical behavior of mother-in-laws and their daughter-in-laws not getting along? Or is this some type of power play or her blaming Sophia for Nikki's death? Could this be some weird family tradition, or in a way, this is how Sophia and her mother-in-law bond? Either way, we cut to the real drama that's igniting at Loretta's apartment. Luckily, no one's home because we see a fire already raging. Now the camera pans and we hear a shattering sound and the glass from the window breaks outwards. Now on first viewing, I totally thought someone threw something into the apartment to start this fire. But on rewatch, you can see that the fire was already going and then the glass broke. So was it the intense pressure of the fire that cracked the glass, or was someone actually setting the fire on purpose? If so, who the heck would target Loretta? Now, did you all get the same impression? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because this feels very important to not just this episode, but maybe episodes ahead. Meanwhile, over at Oliver's, we see he's looking over the best and final offer for his apartment. Now, it's from an anonymous buyer represented by a mysterious S. Powell. The real question is, who is this anonymous buyer? And does this real estate agent S. Powell have anything to do with our season's central mystery? I say all that because in this building, everything is connected. As Oliver gets a knock on the door, it's his new wife Loretta in tears, as her place of 47 years went into flames, supposedly due to a faulty electric tea kettle. Now, to lift her spirits, Loretta wants to join the trio as they have their newly updated murder board and its new prime suspects on it, which are called the Widow's Peak, and that's the duo of Loretta and Sophia, who they can actually podcast about after the billionaire debacle. Now, we get a quick update on Charles's love life. Now, Sophia actually returned Charles' phone, but as it appears, it was just a one-night stand, or as Charles puts it, it was a hit it or quit it, time to move on. Now, back to the serious stuff, the trio needs more information on Lorraine and, more importantly, what was in the mysterious bag. Now, since Oliver knows Flatbush like the back of his hand, they tasked him with the investigation. But we all know Lorraine isn't exactly Oliver's biggest fan. So, Loretta, embodying a character she was supposed to play on TV by the name of Emily before it got cut, volunteers to join her husband. Meanwhile, Detective Williams arrives to collect the finger to identify who it belongs to at a lab, but unfortunately, the missing finger is now literally missing because someone stole it. Now, back at Charles's apartment, looking for clues for the stolen finger, you'll notice the earring he's rocking, which I found to be hilarious. Now, they spot some dirt by his refrigerator, which Charles believes he might have tracked himself, but quickly blames it on the maid for overlooking it. Now, backing up for a second. I can remember Charles mentioning a maid in previous seasons, but I don't think we've ever met this maid before. Which brings me to this question. Is this person someone we should be concerned about? Now, I mentioned in my previous breakdown if Charles's online dating would be important, and it definitely is, as he's exchanging some very flirty body part focused messages with a woman named Priscilla. More on her a little bit later. Now, Detective Williams wants the security footage to figure out who stole the finger, and the new robot might be able to help. Now, on their way, they bump into Thee in the elevator, dancing and singing to her own ridiculously catchy song. Now, I would be lying if I didn't admit that this song is legit catchy as hell, and it kind of sounds like a riff on Doja Cat's Say So. Now, Thee notices that they're on a case and casually mentions that when she was hanging out doing shrooms with Lady Gaga and Seth Rogen, they noticed a light coming from Charles's floor. Now, apparently, they went to his apartment and saw a light coming from underneath his door. Now, Detective Williams, sensing the undeniable tension between Mabel and Thee, she forces Mabel to put their differences aside and asks what Thee might know about the alleged break-in at Charles's place. Now, back with our newlyweds, we learn some new information about Oliver's time in Flatbush. We find out that he was a foster kid living there between the ages of 9 and 12 with his second set of foster parents named Sue and Al. As we get a brief flashback to little Oliver, teasing that we'll be getting more throughout this episode. Now, as they arrive to Lorraine's house, they notice that there's an open house happening. It's certainly not uncommon for someone to want to move on after losing a loved one, but Oliver and Loretta are convinced it's part of a grand plan after killing her husband. Now, as they enter, Loretta, or should I call her Emily, sneaks upstairs into a room marked off limits, only to be immediately met with a dagger drawn on her by Lorraine. Now, this scene marks the first time that Lorraine and Loretta are meeting. This is also Meryl Streep and Diane Yeast, two icons sharing the screen for the third time in their careers. Now, the tension is quickly broken when they discover a shared interest in Maria Callas. Lorraine tells Loretta how Lester got the dagger from her last performance at an auction for their anniversary. She recounts how much she loved Lester over the 30 years of their marriage and how much she misses the kisses he would give her every night before bed. Lorraine is selling this place because she can't bear being there without Lester, and honestly, she can't afford it either, as she's even selling the dagger, which we see Loretta ends up buying. Now, I want to briefly discuss the Marie Callas element of this episode. Now, we saw Lorraine, Loretta, and even Sophia are all fans of hers, but thematically speaking, I don't really see its importance. Now, I'm well aware of Marie Callas' career, especially after watching a few films of hers about her life, including the one last year called Maria, played by Angelina Jolie. Now, for you all that do not know, she had quite an interesting life on and off the stage, from behavioral issues, had many love affairs, and much more, but besides that, she was known as the Bible of opera. Now, more notably is her unfortunate death at the age of 53 due to a heart attack. Again, I understand her level of popularity and why these characters would be fond of her, but I can't see the deeper connection or clues to why she was such a focal point in this episode. Now, could it be foreshadowing that one of these three women, Sophia, Loretta, or Lorraine, die of a heart attack at some point this season? Let me know your thoughts about the importance of Maria in this episode in the comments below. Now, back to the episode. During the conversation between Lorraine and Loretta, we cut back to Oliver, who's having a flashback sequence in which we see some of his childhood, showing how his foster parents completely ignored his interests in theater. Now, after speaking with Lorraine, Loretta doesn't believe she killed her husband. But as she's telling Oliver this, Lorraine and Sophia exchange another bag, as Loretta now has changed her heart and they follow them. Now, as they tell the suspicious duo, they get distracted by a man asking if they want to sign a petition to stop the first casino coming to New York. Now, by speaking to this man, they unfortunately lose Lorraine and Sophia. Now, is this new casino a major plot point we should be paying attention to? Could the people behind the potential casino be our 3 billionaires, aka the new mob, looking to replace the Velvet Room? Or could this be something Mayor Tillman is behind as part of his new campaign? Now, speaking of distractions, Oliver spots the old theater that was around when he was a kid, and he wants to take Loretta inside. Now here we get another flashback to young Oliver finding pure joy and, more importantly, family on stage with the other kids. This wasn't just about performing, it was a safety and a sanctuary for little Oliver. Now this trip to the past resurfaces Oliver's thoughts on why he's so afraid to leave the building, because the stage and the Arconia are the only places he felt safe. Now this being the point of all the little Oliver flashbacks to show us as an audience where his love of theater stemmed from, but also how it's his safe place. Now come to think of it, maybe this has ties to Marie Callas, because from what I understand, her being on stage was when she felt the most vulnerable, she felt the most comfortable, and also the most alive. Now, Oliver tells Loretta about the offer on his place, but Loretta knows exactly what Oliver needs. Seizing the moment, she brings him on stage. They share lines from their projects they never got to do, a beautiful intimate moment that lets Oliver finally say the words he never could. Now, unfortunately, it's interrupted, though, by a standing ovation from an unexpected audience, and it's Sophia and Lorraine. We watch as they confront each other, but we also get a better understanding of what the wives are up to. Sophia explains that Nikki was running businesses out of the building, which we knew, and Lester was involved. And Sophia, well, she was simply giving Lorraine Lester's cut. Now, this confirms my long-held suspicion that these women might look suspicious, but they're not cold-blooded killers. Now, Lorraine is still under the impression that Lester slipped and fell. But Oliver tells her that he was killed as we watch this sweet lady quickly go absolutely furious in 2 seconds, questioning who possibly killed her husband. Now, Lorraine reveals that she runs the theater now, and the money that was given to her by Lester's work is what's keeping the lights on. Now, we also find out that Lester didn't just work for Nikki out of greed, he worked for Nikki for all those years to save up to buy a place for him and his wife in the Arconia, as it was supposed to be their dream home. Now, Sophia is also here to drop off some props for the play. As the wives are now off the hook, as I predicted these women didn't kill their husbands, but again, they did kind of look suspicious, and who's to say there may be some more truth to find out about them. As Lorraine gives Oliver the bird whistle Lester had on him the night he died, a clue that I would imagine will come back into play at some point. Now again, do you all feel that we got all the truth from these wives, or is there something more that they're hiding that hasn't been revealed quite yet? Meanwhile, back with Charles, Mabel, and Detective Williams, we meet the new Lester robot who gives him the footage that Thee mentioned. Now initially, they couldn't find the timestamp and Mabel calls Thee out for lying. But seconds later, there she is. As Thee was telling the truth, and Mabel definitely hurt her feelings in the process. Now back to the footage from Charles's apartment, we see that some of it is missing, as it appears that someone tampered with it, and if they could mess with Charles's apartment's footage, they could absolutely have messed with the footage from the night that Lester died. Now remember a couple weeks ago, I had floated the theory that the tech-savvy villain, aka Bash, the billionaire, might have those capabilities of messing with footage. Now Mabel goes to apologize to Thee, but instead she gets heels thrown at her. Now after throwing some shoes at each other, they both realize something. They were both just deeply depressed after losing their friend. That grief, that pain, caused all the miscommunication and beef between them for years. Another prediction comes true here as Thea admits that she was jealous of Mabel the whole time, and her new hit song, I Wish I Was You, was actually about Mabel. As we watch they make up, and these once old friends are now officially back on track. Now, back at Oliver's, everyone's here, and they got the courtyard footage, but first, Oliver has to tell Mabel something. Now, he tells Mabel that he did accept the offer, and he will be moving, but not too far away from where they currently are. Now, it'll be interesting to see who this buyer is, and if they will be a part of this season, and if we'll have to say goodbye to Oliver leaving the building by the season's end. Now, back to the footage, they review it, and it confirms Lester wasn't alone when he died. as Charles takes notice that the dating app in which he was getting catfished on shares the same logo as the footage they're watching, and that's because it's owned by the same company. As we end this episode with Oliver and Loretta in the elevator excited for their new adventure together, as we see a camera watching them and it has the same logo as the dating app and on the footage as it's revealed to be owned by Bash the billionaire, who's been messaging Charles this whole time under the name Priscilla and seems to be the prime suspect who messed with the footage.
You're turning the Arconia into a casino?
Well, have a good night. Hopefully they'll have murders in your next building, too.
Well, that's one way to tell someone that it's time to move. Welcome back to my channel, where today we'll be discussing episode 7 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, titled Silver Alert. This episode takes us to the country where our trio plays board games with some pretty high stakes. We learn that Camilla is no one to mess with, and the Arconia is potentially getting a major makeover. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a crazy, and I mean crazy, theory of who I believe the killer or killers are and how it involves a killer AI machine that will make Oliver's crazy stories sound sane. With that said, let's put on our boots because we got some games to play as we try to solve this case and break down this episode, full spoilers ahead. We open this week's episode away from the city and into the country, where we meet two new characters played by real-life married couple Becky Ann and Dylan Baker. Now, Becky's character receives a silver alert for an elderly person that's gone missing, and that missing person is our Oliver, who's in danger and needs help. As we flash back to 9 hours earlier, here we find our trio at Oliver's place attempting to crack the case on Bash, who we know is their current prime suspect, by hoping to find Bash's location by listening to his Greatness Academy session. Now, Charles is still deeply traumatized, and rightfully so, still in his feelings about being catfished by Bash, as we watch them prepare for an interview for the mayor. But thanks to their pesky contract, they can't podcast about their latest suspect, but they still need to make content because of their contract. Now, as the mayor arrives, we see Charles is very lively as he's taking notes from WandaFi to really slut it up while introducing the mayor to their podcast. Now, the conversation starts off with some pretty heavy topics. For example, Oliver wants to know if the mayor will be fixing the sticky push button on the street corner, riveting stuff. But then the mayor tries to steer the conversation to murder, which Mabel quickly shuts it down, reminding him it's off limits because of their contract. Now, the mayor suspects they have a lead, and they mention that it is Bash, which Tillman is shocked to hear because he claims he loves Bash, or that's at least what he says in front of his assistant Romy before sending her off to get him some coffee. And as soon as she's out of earshot, Mayor Tillman looks at our trio and tells them that Bash is indeed the murderer. Now, going back to that scene, you notice how the assistant looked when Bash's name got brought up. As we'll find out, she's actually his niece. Now, taking a look at the title sequence this week, we get a teaser showing us little Algie as he's seen in Charles, Oliver, and Mabel's place. Now, stay tuned because I have a lot to say about this young man a little bit later in this breakdown. Now, Tillman explains that Romy was a forced hire, a spy placed by Bash to keep tabs on the mayor. Now, Tillman isn't 100% sure that Bash is the murderer, but he does say that he knows that Bash would do anything to get ahead, meaning that murder isn't off the table if he believes it'll help him win. Now, apparently Bash helped Tillman get elected, racking up some alarming numbers of IOUs that grew from small favors to massive demands. Now, these demands crippled Tillman's campaign promises, and the real reason he's on the podcast was to regain the public trust. Now, Tillman also confirms my suspicions in that Bash basically operates above the law. Remember those dirty cops who found Nikki's body? Charles certainly does, as he connects the dots as to see how powerful the Bash influence is. Now, Mayor Tillman proposes an alliance. He wants to team up with our trio to take Bash down. Now, before his assistant returns, he gives them a tip about Bash's secret rich people meeting in the middle of nowhere in Connecticut. As the mission of the week is to get dirt on Bash, as we can see, the stakes are incredibly high in this episode because Bash is probably the most dangerous and most likely the most powerful suspect they've ever faced. So naturally, against Oliver's better judgment, they head out to Connecticut to what Oliver appropriately dubs Bash's Lion's Den. Now, in a moment that's going to cause major headache later, we see Oliver texting Loretta, dramatically claiming he's been taken against his will. But thanks to no cell phone service in the middle of nowhere, he can't send a follow-up text clarifying that he was just kidding. Now, outside this creepy estate, they meet Algie, Bash's son, the same unnerving kid from the title sequence, casually making a shiv. Now, is he a ghost? Is he a zombie? Is he the manifestation of pure evil? Well, we don't know, but he's definitely creepy as hell, and I think I know why. Let the crazy theories begin. Let me throw one at you all right here. We see Algie with a knife and mentioning how he doesn't interrupt the games or else he'll be sent to the cellar. Now, later in the episode, Bash said he's never missed a single bedtime for Algie. So, did Bash take little Algie to the building and he snuck into the Velvet Room and interrupted a game, and whether it was accidental or on purpose, did he cut our mysterious person's missing finger off? I mean, that would explain why Bash had that footage edited, because he didn't want his son to be there or to be shown to be there and show that he was maybe involved. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg for this new character. More on this Chucky killer kid later. Now, inside, they stumbled upon the three billionaires, not plotting world domination, but instead they're playing Operation. Now, of course, Oliver gets creeped out because he didn't want to be there in the first place, as he accidentally makes a noise and they get outed as the trio is caught trespassing. By the way, is there a reason why Camilla is always wearing gloves? Now, could she be missing a finger? And was Algie, with his shiv making tendencies, responsible for that missing finger? Now, back with our two trios, apparently these billionaires occasionally take a break from being rich to have game nights and to share gossip. Now, our trio decides to stay and watch them play board games to see if they're being honest, until Bash steps away to handle some business, as it's time to get round two of our trio taking on the billionaires one by one. First up, we have Camilla and Oliver. Camilla learns Oliver might be selling his place, and she seems involved, more on that later, as she gets upset that Oliver hasn't thanked her for the remodel which she did to make his place more attractive to this mysterious new buyer. Now, Camilla got a bit aggressive with Oliver, threatening to, as I quote,
"I should cut off your balls and shave them into a potpourri."
Now, she blamed it on the alcohol and apologized, but this threat, and later when she pulls out the gun on our trio, it's safe to say that Camilla White has a pretty mean and nasty side to her. Now, could these be signs that point her to turning a level of violence into murder? I remind you all just how quickly her team was able to remodel Oliver's place. A team that quick and efficient and clean, I bet could definitely clean up a murder scene if their boss lost their temper. Meanwhile, Charles, still wearing his heart on his sleeve, confronts Bash about catfishing him and, more importantly, calls him out as a murderer. Now, Bash completely ignores the catfish allegations, but he denies being a killer. His reasoning? He hates death. He's obsessed with staying youthful because he lost his papa at a young age, and he wants to be around for his son Algie forever. Now, the key word there to pay attention to is forever. Is this a genuine motive or a manipulative deflection? I'm leaning towards the latter, but Charles looks momentarily swayed. And lastly, we have Mabel and Jay finally catching up after Jay lied to her. Now, Jay, the charmer, continues to lay on the flirtation on Mabel, but then he lets something slip that's pretty important.
Look, I know my friends are eccentric, but really we're just a bunch of bored, rich people hashing out a bet. The same one we were trying to settle the last time we were in that gaming parlor.
Night that Lester died. Now, Mabel wants to cut through the BS as she proposes a high-stakes board game. Our trio versus the billionaires. Now, if our trio wins, the billionaires tell them everything, and if the trio loses, they stop investigating them forever, as the challenge is accepted. But Oliver, looking completely done with the games and the danger, stands up. He tells them he's got too much to lose with Loretta and he's not risking his life or their future for this. He's had enough of the games as we watch Oliver leave. Now it is time for the game Who Can Name the Most Celebrities Under a Minute. The billionaires get historical figures and Camilla and Jay manage to get 5 names, putting pressure on Charles and Mabel. Now we have a little moment where little Algie cheers his dad on but is told to go to the cellar. I can't help but to think that Algie is someone of importance. Now, let me throw another wild theory out there to you all. We know that Bash is a tech genius said to be pushing the envelope of new innovations. What if, and I mean a big what if Algie isn't an actual human child, but instead he's an AI robot? Bash doesn't actually have real kids, but instead he considers his robots his children, and Algae is one of his latest innovations. What if this cellar is where he charges his robots up? That would explain his weird and odd behavior because he's not a kid, he's an AI machine. I want to go back to the scene where Bash was cutting bark from that tree skin. Listen to what he tells Charles.
The bark helps with my Algernon's digestion.
Now, this makes me think of a short story by the name of Flowers of Elgeron. The story is told by a series of progress reports written by Charlie Gordon, the first human subject for the surgery, and it touches on the ethical and moral themes such as treatment of the mentally disabled. Again, I believe Algae is no human child, but instead he is an AI robot created by his creator Bash to prolong his life. Again, I told y'all it's a wild theory I have, but one that isn't out of the realm of possibility. Now, back to the game, this brings us to Charles and Mabel. And their category, Broadway. Now, if Oliver hadn't run off into the woods, this would be a slam dunk. But without the Broadway prince, Charles and Mabel are staring down the barrel of total defeat. Now, Mabel is no Broadway expert, but there is a lot on the line now, and the time for a miracle. Meanwhile, back in the literal woods, Oliver is still suffering from a total lack of reception. Now back to the game, we see Mabel and Charles start off pretty bad by passing on everything. But then Mabel has a stroke of genius. She realizes that Oliver uses stories about Broadway legends to explain everything. She starts using those anecdotes as clues, and Charles is firing away with the correct answers, and ladies and gentlemen, they actually win.
You motherfuckers beat us.
This just proves both Mabel and Charles are truly great listeners, and they listen to every ridiculous, over-the-top story that Oliver tells. Their friendship is magic, even if it's based on the life and times of Ethel Merman. Now, the billionaires revealed that the night that Lester died, they weren't playing for fun. They were playing for the biggest New York development contract since Grand Central. And yes, as I predicted in my last week's breakdown, it was for the ownership of New York's very first casino permit. This whole getaway, the board games, the ridiculous challenges, it was a competition to determine who would be the face of the bid. Now, Bash also explains that scrubbing of the footage was for pure vanity. He never likes to be seen or to have people track his comings and goings. Again, this kind of connects to my Algae theory. Bash mentioned swiping footage of him and Algae at a Jamba Juice. I'm telling you all, Algae was with his papa that night. As of now, the truth is clear. This was about a casino, not a murder, or was it? However, there is still one glaring mystery unsolved. As Mabel picks up their cheap plastic winner's trophy, she notices how increasingly tense the billionaires have become. As she decides to crack it open, and sitting inside the award is the prize that determines who truly wins the games, and it is the missing stolen finger. Now back to Oliver, we revisit the opening scene where we found him in distress and now understand why he was in a panic. When he finally found reception, the floodgates opened. Missed calls, text messages, all from Loretta detailing her concern, and one final panic-inducing message that she was going to report him missing, hence the silver alert as Oliver is in full flight mode. Again, he's found by the couple we met at the start, who assumes that he's just a lost, delusional elderly person, which, by the way, isn't entirely inaccurate. Now, trying to explain the situation, they think Oliver is spinning a wild tale. Now, Oliver rambles a bunch of stuff that does sound kind of ridiculous if you don't know him. For example, he talks about he has a wife that's an actress that's filming a show in New Zealand, his friends are being held captive, and he can't get the police involved because the mayor told him that the police can't be trusted, and also the mayor was on his podcast this very morning. And just for good measure, he casually drops that he's friends with Ron Howard and that they're making a movie about him. To the unsuspecting couple, Oliver sounds entirely unhinged. Now back at the mansion, Jay tries to stop Charles and Mabel from leaving. This finger is the key to the entire operation. He says how much danger they're in because this finger was very expensive to get. Now Mabel guilt trips him, and we can tell that Jay has a soft spot for her, so he eventually lets them go. Now going back to what Jay was saying, what on earth did he mean by they paid for the finger, and what danger are they really in? Again, if my theory of Algae cutting someone's finger off and it getting in the mix in Oliver Shrimp, could this person be so important that they are even more powerful than the billionaires and they have the green light to giving this casino a go? I guess the idea being that if they return the finger back to the person, it would bid will for them if they returned it. But the question remains, who would be as powerful or as important as the three billionaires? Now, as we come to a close of this episode, Mabel and Charles are being Michael Myers style slowly chased down by the arranged billionaires, but fear not, as Oliver having successfully convinced the couple that found him to take him back as he makes a grand entrance. And it's on a tractor, as they pile in and speed away back to Manhattan with a very expensive dead finger. Now, back at Charles's place, the trio is debating what they should do with this little dead finger as Camilla arrives to settle things her way. Camilla reveals that the finger is the ultimate decider for the casino bid and that there's only one permit, as she explains her goal, making gambling chic. And then that temper that we spoke about comes into play, as Camilla pulls out a mini small gun to let them know that she means serious business, as the trio valuing their lives over the severed finger handed over to her. And like most villains do when they feel in control, Camilla explains her grand vision. Remember how Ursula mentioned a lot of people were moving out of the Arconia recently? Well, Camilla is the buyer for not only Oliver's place, but she also bought up all the recently vacant units as well, as her plan is to build what she calls the Camilla Club Casino at the Arconia. Alright, so let's talk about that final moment. Now, I didn't think this was possible, but based on some of the promotional stuff I've seen online the last few weeks for this show, it appears that we will see Camilla's plan come into fruition, meaning that the building will be changed forever.
Some people wait their whole lives for luck.
Wait a second.
And it never comes.
What the? When Camilla said that doorman, she didn't mean Lester.
She meant Randall.
Some people get impatient, and they do what it takes to get some luck for themselves.
Welcome back to my channel, where today we'll be discussing episode 8 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, titled Cuckoo Chicks. This episode takes us on a couples therapy session between Charles and Oliver. We learn that Camilla had a thing for Nicky, and before he died, Lester sent out a very important message that may have revealed one of the killers. Let's solve this case and break down this episode, full spoilers ahead. We open with a voiceover by Lorraine talking about Lady Luck as we flash back to 2 years ago in the Velvet Room full of New York elites as we follow Camilla walking towards Nicky. She tells him how the cigars and the men hitting on women have its limits in the Velvet Room as she proposes a once-a-month ladies' night to Nicky, and he accepts, this being her way of planting the seed of her larger plan for the future. Now, immediately you can see the flirtatious vibes between the two, but later on in this episode, the question becomes, was this a one-way street, or were both parties really interested in each other? Back to present day, at Mabel's place, we see her telling Vince the unfortunate news about the casino takeover coming to the building. Thea arrives and invites Mabel as her +1 to a special ladies' night event in the building hosted by Camilla. This obviously being the same event that we just saw her pitch to Nicky at the start of the episode. Now, we don't see V for the rest of this episode, but am I the only one who still has suspicions about her? She can't just be the fun old friend who reunites with Mabel after all these years, right? I don't know, man. I'm still holding on to the idea of what she mentioned about her manager being an assassin a few episodes ago. I just feel like she's going to be way more important in some type of capacity. Now, in the lobby, Oliver and Charles learn from Randall that Camilla now owns 82 of the 165 units in the building, meaning that she's 1 unit away from owning 51% of the building and 1 step closer to her casino. Now, Oliver finds himself in a dilemma because he doesn't want to move now and sell to Camilla, especially having a gun pointed at him in last episode, but if he doesn't sell, he's afraid how Loretta would take the news after getting excited about starting over with Oliver after losing her place in the fire. Now, Mabel shares the news about Ladies' Night, and Charles and Oliver are excited about this because, as they say, ladies love to yap about everything, including boys and bad decisions. So they expect Mabel to get some valuable information from Camilla and even connect with Camilla on a new level and, as they say, a female level. Now at Oliver's, Charles and him continue to give Mabel some terrible advice about the ladies' night as Loretta arrives and she's invited our favorite detective, Williams, whose flight was canceled just like Loretta's. Williams knows a thing or two around a card table and comes up with a plan. She'll make Camilla go on a losing streak, and in doing so, she'll be on a tilt after losing so much, and she'll make bad decisions like talking too much. Now in this moment, this episode gives us some critical Charles Savage deep cuts. We learn that as a kid, Charles helped his mother cheat at card games using magic tricks. Williams instantly connects the dots. Charles's addiction to sexy villains stems from only receiving affection when assisting his cheating mom. Suddenly, his lifelong love of dangerous women makes perfect sense. Traumatic sense. Now, back to Williams' plan, we see that Mabel has the impossible task of smiling naturally, which doesn't come easy to her, as we see Loretta suggest the backup plan, and it's her using her abilities to talk to ghosts, because of course she used to be a medium back in the day, which is obviously news to Oliver. Now, while waiting for a flight, Loretta reveals that she did some research on Camilla. As she says that she's not all the way there, some would even say that she's cuckoo, as she believes she's the reincarnated version of her great-grandmother, who, by the way, is the reason Camilla always wears gloves, because it was her grandmother's favorite accessory. As the mission to save the building is now in motion. Now, later that evening, dressed to the nines, the ladies are ready. But on their way to the ladies' night, they find Lorraine crying. Now we find out Lorraine hasn't been able to sleep since learning that her husband was murdered, as Loretta lets it out of what they're doing for the evening and suggests that Lorraine join them for ladies' night. Lorraine immediately agrees to join them because if Camilla is responsible for the death of her husband, Lorraine wants answers. Now downstairs in the Velvet Room, we see the ladies decide to split up as Williams decides to pull a last-minute audible, changing into a dealer outfit to control the game. As Camilla arrives and the games are on. Now at first, the plan is working. Camilla is actually losing. But the emotions are running too hot. Lorraine, overpowered by grief and rage, loses her composure, showing her hand, literally, as she threatens Camilla. Now Mabel has to escort the furious Lorraine upstairs to cool her down to save their mission from being a total collapse. Now upstairs, a piece of the mystery is brought up as Lorraine wishes that the elevator crank Lester always carried with him was in the case that was made for him, as Mabel takes note of this, which will become important for later in this episode. Now, back in the Velvet Room, Loretta pulls a Detective Williams and makes her own audible as she tells Camilla that Williams is double dealing, which gets her kicked out, leaving Loretta to getting this mission done on her own. Loretta doing this gains Camilla's trust as she offers her a reading to speak to the dead, and it's not her great-grandmother, but instead it's an old romantic relationship. As we get quick flashes of someone cutting the leather on the gaming table with a cleaver, and Camilla hearing the sounds of a martini being shaken as she's thinking about Nikki. Now, with the psychic powers of Loretta, we get another flashback with Camilla and Nikki. We see Camilla pitching Nikki on turning the Velvet Room into a new full-scale casino, effectively destroying the competition, which is Bash and Jay's new venture. Now this news gets Nikki upset as Loretta points out the fact that Nikki had to be out of the picture first before anyone else could start their own casino in the city, alluding to someone having to had killed him first. Now Camilla shares her vision with him and wants to partner with Nikki. Now Nikki brings up that the Velvet Room in this casino is his wife's family's legacy and he can't just simply put it in someone else's hands, even despite things not being 100% with him and his wife, who he mentions he still loves. Now he doesn't flat out say no in this moment, but he also doesn't say yes, as he tells her that he'll rather speak about this matter later and he walks away. Now clearly that conversation didn't go as Camilla planned, and she might have even became jealous of the fact that he brought up his wife. You would imagine a woman of Camilla's status isn't used to people not immediately falling in line and saying yes to whatever she offers. As we see, after Nikki didn't give her a yes, Camilla set her plans in motion to buying up the units in the building without Nikki's blessing. Meanwhile, the guys are having a men's night. Charles and Oliver are frantically banging on doors trying to save the remaining residents from selling to Camilla. Now, while Charles is still dealing with the fact that his childhood trauma is the root to his romantic relationships with women, we see Oliver seems to be worried that he might have married Loretta without really truly understanding and knowing who she is. Now, they get a text from Randall that Dr. Stanley, the therapist, has sold his unit too. But the deal isn't official until morning, giving them enough time to convince him to reconsider. Now, to help in this process, we see Oliver and Charles agree to let Stanley be their therapist for the night to deal with their recently discovered trauma and anxiety. As the therapy session begins, we see Detective Williams joins them, excited to hear their trauma, in hopes that this will lift her spirits after Loretta hijacked her plans. Now, instead of sitting on the sidelines, we see Detective Williams shares her 2 cents on Charles' issues as he brings up being jealous over Oliver's relationship with Loretta. Now, Oliver mentions that things aren't sunshine and rainbows because he's uncertain about not fully knowing who Loretta is. As these moments of honesty creates a breakthrough for both Charles and Oliver and actually makes Stanley think about his own decision about moving out. Now, Williams gets Stanley to admit that he's afraid and he ultimately reconsiders moving and he wants to stay, yet again proving that Detective Williams is a jack of all trades, solving crimes and people's problems as well, but unfortunately, it's too late. The clock strikes midnight, the deal is sealed, and Camilla officially owns 51% of the building. The casino is coming unless the ladies have had better luck. Now, back to the ladies' night, we see Loretta continues to pry away at Camilla's feelings towards Nicky and how it made her feel after he didn't agree to be her partner of this new casino, and more importantly, setting the stage for Nicky to leaving his wife and to be with her. As this takes us into another flashback where it's the week that Nicky went missing, and we see that he's upset after apparently seeing Sophia with another man having an affair. Now, the Nicky going missing for the week is still unclear, but it would appear that after finding his wife with another man, that led him to going MIA to figuring out his next moves. Now, after the discovery of his wife having an affair, this leads him to joining Camilla in her plans for the casino, as the plan was set. She wanted Nicky to set up a private game with Jay and Bash. So there's our prime suspects being placed in the Velvet Room the night of Lester's death. Now, going back to that flashback scene, to me it seemed that Camilla 100% had something to do with the alleged affair that Sophia was apparently having. Now, the question is, who was the other guy Nicky saw Sophia with? Now, I don't have a ton of evidence to prove this, but based on the male characters we've met so far that's important to this season, my mind goes to the mayor of New York, Mel Tillman, despite acting like he met Sophia for the first time at the restaurant with Charles a few episodes back. Now, if it's the mayor or someone else entirely, could that person be the owner of the missing finger? I could see a situation in which this mysterious person and Nicky got into a fight, resulting in Nicky using that cleaver that was found in his chest and cutting off that person's finger in a moment of rage and believing that he slept with his wife. Not to get too far ahead, but thinking about next week's penultimate episode. If history repeats itself, we most likely will get the reveal of at least one of our murderers. Last season, around this time, we found out about Dudenoff's death, so sticking with the theme of gambling, my money's on us figuring out how Nicky died, leaving Lester's death for the finale, or it could be the other way around. Now, going back to the conversation in the Velvet Room, we see Camilla mentioning the doorman, but she doesn't go into details as she gets a message that she's now an owner of a casino as she's won. Loretta notices the door to Nicky's old office is open and we see her go inside. Now, knowing what we find out later in this episode, how did Randall and Camilla know each other and was he instructed to do something under her instructions? Now, back with Mabel and Lorraine, who's sharing a joint, we see Mabel finds out the news about Camilla in the building. Mabel's conflicted about what to do next as she feels like she's losing control over everything, as she's now even considering going on a date with Jay, as Lorraine shares her thoughts about the matter.
Try not to worry so much about being in control, because not one of us is. Not the poor wife of the doorman who died, or the richest, most powerful person in all the world, and fighting that, that's where real misery comes from.
Now we see Mabel decides to text Jay, ready to see if maybe there's something there between them. Now, I'll be 100% honest with you all, Mabel and Jay romantic angle kind of feels forced at this point in the season. In what world would Mabel now feel the pressure to go on a date with him after he lied to her multiple times so far this season, and not even including the fact that he may be involved in a murder case in some capacity? Now look, I understand the show loves to pair Mabel up with someone for most of its seasons besides season 4, but this love interest to Jay, while shown in episode 3 of the season with them flirting, but still to me, it's kind of coming out of nowhere and it feels forced because again, we only have 2 episodes left, so where exactly can this romance go? Now, back to the conversation with the characters, Mabel shares their box of clues for Lester and gives it to Lorraine as she takes out his bird whistle and lets out a whistle for Lester. Now, Lorraine doing this triggers a notification on Vince's phone about a sighting of a bird in the courtyard. As we end this episode with Mabel returning back to Oliver's place to share how the night was unsuccessful. But in comes Lady Luck herself and Loretta, the winner of the night who's gotten information that she's gathered. She shares the insight about the affair Sophia was having the week that Nikki went missing and the partnership between Camilla and Nikki and how this all connects to Lester's death. But that's not it. Loretta also found the elevator crank with blood on it in Nikki's office, which is now being considered the possible murder weapon. Now, while everyone's excited about Loretta's findings, she says this throwaway line about how Jennifer Aniston, who was at the ladies' night, she passed on the show of being an arsonist. Now, we knew last season about the premise of Loretta's show and how she was dating this fireman and dealing with fire, but it can't be a coincidence that her place was recently destroyed by a fire. Now, I know we all love Loretta, we trust Loretta and whatnot, but did Loretta set her place on fire or did someone else do it? Now, I'm thinking the latter, and as I mentioned in my last breakdown, I think someone did set off that fire, and if this comes to be true, was that sending a message to Loretta similar to what the mysterious person did by poisoning Oliver's dog all the way back in season 1? Now, if this is true, I doubt that it will be answered this season, but I think it's going to be a part of a bigger picture and be a part of the next season's mystery about who this person truly is. Now, Oliver tells Loretta the truth of him not wanting to leave, but it doesn't matter at this point because Camilla has 51% ownership of the building. But Loretta gives him a pick-me-up and tells Oliver that he's going to be the hero at the end of the day and he's going to end up fixing things. Now, our last scene has Lorraine and Vince arriving to tell them about the bird notification that just came in, as Lester's favorite bird has recently appeared in a courtyard, almost like a sign of good luck. The whistle Lorraine sent out activated a camera that was set up by Vince and Lester to capture sightings of their favorite birds, meaning that what happened to Lester that night that he died is on video footage that Bash couldn't have erased. As we look at this footage, and they can't see how Lester fell into the fountain, so that remains a mystery at the moment, but it's obvious that Lester used the whistle to make sure that what happened to him was recorded. But there is more. In our final moments, it appears that the doorman that Camilla was referring to, it wasn't Lester, but instead it was Randall. As we see Randall popping up into the frame and looks around to find Lester in the fountain, and instead of helping him out, we watch as Randall picks up the elevator crank and walks away like nothing happened. As it appears that Randall didn't just find the murder weapon by luck, he created it, or at the very least, he covered up the crime and used the moment to acquire the murder weapon.
I saved the old Arconia with a piece of the old Arconia. Life.
Lester killed Nikki? Bird-watching adorable Lester?
He did it for the building, so there wouldn't be any more crime. He did it for you.
Saying ain't so. Can it be true? Did Lester actually kill Nikki to protect the building? Is the adorable, kind, bird-watching Lester a killer? Welcome back to my channel, everybody, where today we'll be discussing the penultimate episode, episode 9 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, titled Lester. This episode was told through the lens of the annoying robot who I predicted weeks ago would hold the key to figuring out the mystery. We also see the building throwing a last supper as the residents discover that a killer may still be in their building. Boy, we have a lot to discuss, so let's solve this case and break down this episode. Full spoilers ahead. We open this week's episode with an important flashback before the murders, back when Lester was still alive. He and Miller unwrap a delivery, which is the new robot doorman ordered by the board. As we know, this bot was intended to help around the building, but was eventually created to replace a human. But Lester ain't having it, as we see him leaving it in the back of the staff area and has it on sleep mode. Now, while the robot's on sleep mode, we see the staff walking by complaining about their job, but we also get more clues to Lester talking to Randall and him being upset about working for Nikki and looking away for a long time, a moment we'll see in its entirety later in this episode. Now, flash forward to the night of the murder, we see Randall is panicking with a bloody elevator crank. And who is standing right there observing this situation? Robot Lester. Randall recognizes it and gestures for the robot to keep this a secret. As we cut to present day where the trio confront Randall about the footage they saw in last episode. Now, of course, he denies, he pivots the conversation, and he bolts, leaving the trio behind as they don't really chase after their targets. This isn't a part of their skill set. Now, throughout the episode, the clock is ticking. We are 19 days away from the full residency evacuation. And Randall is gone, and the trio is back to square one. Meanwhile, we see Howard is quick to point out how since Randall is now missing, Robot Lester is now king of the palace. Now during this, we see Jay is really trying to convince Mabel to go out with him on their date. We skip ahead, and now it's 8 days left into move-out day. Now inside the cleaners, we find the Cachamilio brothers with their Nonna as the trio asks when was the last time they've seen Randall, but they've had no luck in finding out anything because the boys are so concerned about the last time they hung out with their mom to watch movies and eat popcorn. Now, I've had my suspicions about the Cachamilio brothers since we first were introduced to them in episode 1. I'm starting to get the feeling that they're pretending. Like this whole they don't know what's going on is like one big giant act. Are they maybe the murder minds behind this season's mystery led by their Nonna? More on them later, but the countdown drops rapidly from 19 days, 8 days, and finally 1 day left. As Randall has seamlessly vanished, there's no phone call records, he hasn't used his credit card, he's completely off the grid. Meanwhile, we watch as the trio's paths are going separate ways. Charles has a nursing home accidentally booked, Oliver is ready to move to New Zealand, and Mabel is still trying to figure out where she belongs outside of these storied walls. But then the final nail in the coffin hits as Mabel gets an alert on her phone, and it's Randall who's posted online that he's in Cuba. As their last lead is officially gone and all hope seems to be lost, or so they think. Now downstairs, Mabel runs into fresh out of jail Teddy, who's in the lobby. During these tough times, Mabel joins Teddy in drinking some non-toilet wine as they catch up and Teddy shares his life-changing experiences while he was in the clink. Meanwhile, this episode was really about the two Lesters, as we see Robot Lester doing his job and reminding the residents to remember the bylaws and rules, despite it being the final day in the building. But here is the real tragedy of this moment, and it belongs to Howard, as we witness the season's most heartbreaking breakup, and that's Howard and Robot Lester. Howard's retina scan, which previously granted him access to the robot, suddenly fails. And the reason? Camilla White. She has officially taken over the security, replacing the old system. As we see Howard heartbroken by this, and later on we learn why, and it's more heartbreaking than I initially thought. Now, after a few drinks, we see Mabel reaches her breaking point. She's done. She announces she's quitting the investigation for good. And just as she's saying that, in comes Detective Williams. Now, Detective Williams is here on the last night, not to arrest anyone, but she wants to mourn the end of the building, but later, she reminds Mabel who she is and what she's great at. Meanwhile, as Charles completes his packing, we see Oliver's brimming with energy, proposing a grand hurrah. Now, the theme being the Last Supper and the Arconia, a tribute to their bonds. But Charles, he has other plans. A baseball game with a gentleman named Jim, an old friend that he met at the Hands Across America. As it appears that Charles has taken Mabel quitting to heart, but deep down, he can't face saying goodbye to Oliver and Mabel, so he's choosing to run towards a new life. Meanwhile, we see Oliver's left alone and he's heartbroken as well as he's starting to realize that the Arconia isn't just closing, but the trio is actually fracturing. Now, down in the Velvet Room, we see Mabel and Williams are sharing a drink. Mabel shares with Williams her plans to see if Jay is a good guy by joining him for a week on his yacht. Now, it's here we see Detective Williams reminding Mabel how silly it is of an idea of spending time with Jay and reminds her who they are at heart. They're people who just can't let problems go unsolved despite the odds being stacked up against them. Now, as Detective Williams is headed back to work, we watch as a slightly tipsy Mabel notices a shoe print on the floor, but after taking a closer look, Williams says that it's half of a flip-flop print. But here's the thing, the direction is going towards them, which leads them to fighting a mystery hidden door as they walk inside. Now inside, they find blood on the floor and the same white substance found on Nikki's clothes. William sees it leads directly into Nikki's dry cleaners, which means Nikki's body was brought into the cleaners through this secret room. Now, meanwhile, Mabel also notices the background that Randall used to pretend he was in Cuba, which means that he's still somewhere in the building. Alright, let's discuss this secret room because this is very important to the mystery. So later in this episode, the show wants us to believe that Lester killed Nikki, and we'll discuss my thoughts on that later, but assuming that's true, we're supposed to expect Lester to drag Nikki's body, who has at least 80 to 100 pounds on him. He drugged the body through this secret room, up the stairs, and put him in the cleaners. I'm not buying it. So whoever moved that body through this room has to be important. And again, I don't believe it was Randall. I don't believe it was Lester. Who moved Nikki's body through this secret entrance? Now, back to the scene, we see Mabel finds Charles and Oliver and fills them in on Randall's whereabouts in the hidden room, but they don't know where he is currently in the building until a delivery guy arrives to drop off food to a vacant unit, as Robot Lester tells them that Randall has been squatting there. As the trio surprise Randall, but yet again he pulls another runaway move on them. As he runs through the lobby filled with people who can't run after him, we see Randall get stopped by running into Theo, as it is time for Randall to explain what actually happened. Now, I knew that Randall was being used as a misdirect in my last breakdown, but we watch as Randall finally tells the truth. Randall admits that he was following Lester's orders. He was told by Lester to keep quiet about the night of the murder for his own safety. But how do we verify this? The only witness is dead. Unless the robot saw everything. Which again, I did say that Lester robot would be handy a couple weeks ago. Now luckily, the previous robot who was thrown off the building's files were completely uploaded into the new model, as it shows everyone what actually happened that night. As they dim down the lights and watch the footage, it shows Lester out of breath as he needs Randall's help. He needed Randall to take the shrimp to Oliver's, but in his hand, he's holding the elevator crank, which is covered in blood, but it's not his blood. Now, Lester goes on and tells Randall that he didn't mean to hurt anyone, but he couldn't let the mobster take down his building, and he's been looking the other way for a very long time. Now, Randall flat out asks Lester if he killed someone, but Lester doesn't answer and tells Randall to keep this between them, again, for his own safety. Lester tells him to deliver the shrimp to Oliver because he knows what that would do, meaning that he put the finger in the shrimp for Oliver and the trio to uncover the truth about what actually happened to Nikki potentially. Lester says that he did what he did to save the building by using a piece of the building, the crank, as a weapon, a very poetic way of thinking about it. So, as it stands, Lester killed Nikki because he wanted to assure those in the building wouldn't have to deal with any more crimes, but he also didn't want them to lose their homes. Now, to me, the last line there alludes to Lester having had found out about Camilla and Nikki's partnership in turning the building into a casino. He didn't want to allow that to happen, which again makes what Camilla said about the damn doorman last week actually being in reference to Lester killing Nikki, the man she potentially loved. But now the question still remains, who killed Lester? Now this newfound discovery fuels our trio and others in the building to figuring out Lester's killer. So let's break for a moment and think about how it all could have went down. So in my mind, I envision Camilla, Nikki, Bash, and Jay all met up to learn how Camilla had planned with Nikki about the new casino and the building. Now we know how close in proximity the Velvet Room is to the cleaners, so maybe Nana, who we'll talk about in a second, overheard this meeting that's going on, or even the boys overheard the meeting and called their mom. Sophia, now curious about what's going on, she crashes the party because again we know that the Velvet Room is actually her family's legacy. She goes and crashes this secret meeting and there's a back and forth about Sophia and Nikki about having an affair, but of course Lester's there. But from there, I guess things got extremely heated, a cleaver was used, a finger was chopped off, and at some point Lester killed Nikki. I don't know, guys. It sounds pretty messy to me, but I have a feeling that there will be more people that were in attendance of this meeting. As I mentioned before, I believe the mayor is there. I believe he's the person that's alluding to having an affair with Sophia. But I don't know if I can buy or even believe the kind Lester actually beat a man to death with a crank and thought murdering him would be the answer. There just has to be more to the story. I honestly think Lester was covering up for someone else. And that someone else that comes to mind has to be his wife. But why on earth would she kill Nikki, especially after her and Sophia being like these friends after both losing their husbands? This Lester being the killer is really throwing me for a loop. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we witness Oliver playing Jesus at the Last Supper gathering as some of the original residents share some funny stories about their memories in the building. It's here we learn why Howard was so into the relationship with the robot and why he was so upset about the robot essentially breaking up with him. Now, this wasn't just a simple crush gone wrong. He was recently dumped by Jonathan, and the robot, much like his mother before him, represented a safe space he just lost. This explains his obsession over Lester the robot the whole time over the course of this season. As we watch, Charles gives him some kind words of encouragement about being a good neighbor.
We have done a bad job of checking in with each other in this building, and that's on us. It's easy to assume that everyone is just okay, but sometimes they just aren't. And it's easy to forget to be a good neighbor.
I'm not gonna lie, man, I love this scene. Not to get too emotional and sappy, but this scene to me is why I believe myself and many of you wonderful people love watching this show. Is this a perfect, flawless show with no plot holes? No. Are there moments of nonsensical, over-the-top things that happen for the sake of comedy and not based in story? Yes. But at the end of the day, this show thrives on its lovable characters. It thrives for its delightful charm within the whodunit genre. It's a show where we can all come together from all different walks of life and we deal with our ups and downs. But when Only Murders in the Building's on, we can all momentarily put our lives' difficulties aside and feel like we're part of a community. Because, hey, sometimes it's easy to forget to be a good neighbor. As this conversation with Howard sparks Charles to join his friends in saying goodbye at the Last Supper. Now, speaking of letting go, we see Mabel finally confronts Jay. She's not sailing off into a sunset until he proves that he's a good person. As we watch her shut the door in his face, did you all notice the robot watching Jay very suspiciously? I'm still in the camp that Bash has hacked into the robot and observing all of these conversations. Now in the kitchen, we see the two old friends admitting how much they appreciate their friendship over the years. As we see Charles amidst his fear of goodbyes masked by this baseball game idea, as we see him giving Oliver this heartfelt request for an autograph. Now, was it me, or did this episode feel more like a series finale rather than a penultimate episode? It begs the question, is next week's finale the end of the show? We'll discuss more of that a little bit later. Now, our last scene has the crew figuring out that the marks on the floor came from Lester the robot, but Howard points out that the marks they found isn't from the robot, but instead, it came from someone who owns a motorized wheelchair. And we know the only character this season that has one is...
That is my Nona.
Now we flash back to the night when the finger went missing, as we see Nana and the boys were the ones who took it out of Charles's refrigerator. As we get the voiceover from the robot who says they can't act out of malice, throwing away my robot killer theory idea, as the trio with Howard and recently new Italian speaker Teddy, as they confront them as Nana and the boys were involved in the cover-up, if not the initial crime, as she knows she's been caught.
Did we just save the building?
Yeah, we did.
I can't believe I saved the building.
Welcome back to the channel, where today we'll be discussing episode 10, the finale of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, titled The House Always. This is the episode where the entire season and perhaps the entire legacy of the building crashes down on our trio. We finally got the shocking answers we needed about the deaths of Lester and Nikki, but the price? Potentially the complete destruction of the beloved Arconia. Man, we got a lot to discuss about this episode, the season overall, and what's to come next, so let's break it all down, full spoilers ahead. Now, as I always do, I'm going to be recapping the entire episode and sharing my thoughts along the way, but my review and my more in-depth thoughts about the overall season will be saved towards the end of the breakdown. So I'll be leaving time codes in the description if you all want to jump ahead at any point. The episode starts with a flashback to Nicky's poet era, a time when his dreams were as grand as the Mediterranean. He and Sophia weren't talking about money and power, they were dreaming of Posicano and escaping to a life free of what others wanted from them and how to live. But as we know, those innocent dreams died the moment greed became Nicky's main muse. Now we cut to a breaking point of their relationship as we also find the trio in the present cleverly planting a secret for later. Now, back to the past, we find Sophia finally telling Nicky she's done with her relationship, she's tired of things just being enough. Nicky, incapable of accepting personal failure, immediately jumps to the worst conclusion. She was sleeping with someone else. Now, he doesn't just accuse her, but we watch as he promised to find this person and kill them. Now, that brings us back to the final moments of last week's episode where Nona, who, thank goodness for Teddy, actually speaks English. Now, she confirms the biggest clue yet about the finger. The finger they found did belong to Sophia's lover. As Nona says, she knew, meaning Sophia knew that finger very intimately. Now, just as the trio realizes they need to pivot from who killed Lester to who was Sophia's side piece, the metaphorical reckoning ball turns real. As they learn the building is scheduled for a total destruction. The new casino development, spearheaded by Camilla, is moving forward fast. All that history, all those memories about to be wiped away. The urgency is at an all-time high as they have to solve this now. Now we watch as the trio rethinks about who exactly was in the Velvet Room that night, and maybe one of the billionaires actually faked missing a finger. Now, Oliver, inspired by the need for theatrics, proposes a last-ditch effort. Summon the three billionaires, Jay, Camilla, and Bash, back to the Velvet Room and interrogate them mobster style. The stage is set. Oliver, Charles, and Mabel put on their best, worst mob impressions, joined by the boys for a form of intimidation. They are demanding answers. Which of the billionaires was sleeping with Sophia, and which one of them is missing a finger? Now, this light pressure cracks one of them. And that being Jay, who reveals he was never missing a finger to begin with. He faked the injury, hoping it would make the search easier for the actual missing digit. As we watch, Camilla and Bash also prove that they are perfectly intact. Now this leaves our trio back to square one. If the finger wasn't one of these suspects, then whose was it? As the door opens and in walks the uninvited guest, Mayor Bo Tillman. Now we watch as he pretends that this is his first time in the historical Velvet Room, playing the innocent politician just checking in before the press conference. Now as the mayor walks towards the table, Mabel gets a very important clue via a text message from Howard that may unravel all their questions. As we watch, Mabel takes the cleaver she was holding to intimidate the billionaires, and she swiftly chops off the mayor's fake prosthetic finger, revealing that he killed Lester, but now the question is, why? Now, the text that Howard sent to Mabel showed the autocorrect for "it's beautiful," but it really meant "it's Bo Tillman," which is exactly what Lester sent Lorraine before he was murdered. As we finally learn what happened on the night of both deaths of Lester and Nicky.
But on that night, things went sideways.
We flash back to the moment where we find the billionaires with Lester dealing cards in the Velvet Room as Nicky looks at the pictures he was sent, revealing Sophia and the mayor having an affair. Now, remembering Nicky's promise to killing the person sleeping with his wife, in comes the mayor, ready for his bribes for the casino. As Nicky is tasked with making the mayor a drink, the words "one finger" is mentioned, and already fueled with anger after discovering the man who slept with his wife is in the same room with him, we watch as Nicky takes a bump of coke, picks up a cleaver, and walks towards the mayor and chops off his finger. Now, on the positive side, at least the billionaires were telling the truth about the part where Nicky went berserker mode with the cleaver, but of course they left out the part where it was the mayor's finger that was chopped off. As we watch the chaos happen, Nicky is swinging the cleaver when Lester, already years deep in regret for working with Nicky, tries to intervene by hitting him over the head with his elevator crank. Now, disoriented, we watch as Nicky stumbles, and with the cleaver still in his hand, we see him fall onto Lester, driving the cleaver into his own chest. So I guess I was wrong, because it was true. Lester technically, or perhaps indirectly, killed Nicky by delivering the blow that caused Nicky to fall into the cleaver. As the billionaires try to figure out what to do with Nicky's body, we see Lester runs off with the mayor's finger, as the game is now on to find Lester and the mayor's finger. We see the final confrontation happens where Lester, having already given Randall the finger, faces the mayor. The mayor pulls the typical politician move, trying to sweet-talk Lester.
My old man was a cab driver. Worked hard, lived an honest life. He got nothing for it. Me, I wanted to get things done, so I made a few sacrifices. I bent a few rules, and now I am the mayor of New York City.
Lester channels his inner Ruth Laymore from Ozark.
If you want to stop me, you're gonna have to fucking kill me!
Stop me? You're gonna have to kill me. Right here, in front of all the security cameras.
But the mayor tells him that Bash owns the cameras and they can just simply erase this very conversation. As the mayor panics looking for his finger, we finally get to see the full scene in which Lester was murdered. We see Lester grabbing his bird whistle as he ran outside and texts Lorraine as beautiful as we know to be, it was Bo Tillman. As the mayor and Lester are now both outside, we see them in a scuffle as the mayor pushes Lester and he hits his head violently on the concrete fountain. Just as Nikki was killed by the blunt force trauma leading to a fatal wound, Lester suffered the same fate. But before he died, as we know, we see Lester using the whistle to set off the video footage for Vince and the others to find. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Lester and Nikki died. Let me know how you all felt about this in the comments below. Were you all satisfied or underwhelmed? I'll be honest, the mayor just barely being seen at all this season and to be revealed to be the owner of the finger and to be Lester's killer, yeah, not that exciting or shocking at all. Now, back in the Velvet Room, we see the mayor is calm after confessing to committing murder, but things are about to get a little bit more complicated. As Romy arrives with backup, the crooked cops are with her. As our trio is captured, their phones destroyed, and they are chained up in the hidden room, left to die as the building is about to be destroyed, adding a new meaning to murder in the building. Now upstairs at the press conference, the cops throw the trio's phones in the trash compactor as Howard knows something is wrong with the whole situation and notices the trio is missing. Speaking of the trio, we see them now chained and desperate as Oliver encourages Charles to use his newfound confidence and to use his old magic tricks to save them. And here's where we get our comic relief that only Charles can deliver, as he confesses that the trial he was on wasn't for testosterone, it was for a placebo. But as good friends always do, Mabel and Oliver point out the truth. The confidence that he had throughout the season wasn't because of a drug, it was because of Charles himself. As we watch, Charles channels his inner stripper and climbs the pole that he was chained to, and he frees the trio. Meanwhile, back upstairs, Miller has found the trio's phone as Howard, with the help of V, comes up with a solution by distracting everyone by singing her hit song. Now, while all this is happening, in the Velvet Room, not wanting to accept defeat, we see Jay and Bash are thinking about teaming up and using their money to buy something together, but it's here we can see that Jay is remembering what Mabel said to him about using his money for good. Now, as we see V leads her mini concert downstairs in the Velvet Room, our trio, now being freed by Charles, tells everyone that the mayor is a murderer and they have the proof to show it. It's here we see that the trio used the roulette table to plant a secret recorder, which plays the mayor admitting to murdering Lester. As the mayor tries to escape, he's stopped by Vince, who releases a flurry of birds in the honor of Lester, blocking the mayor from escaping. We watch as the mayor and the crooked cops are arrested, but the building is still slated for destruction. This is where Jay steps up. Inspired by Mabel's earlier advice, Jay grows a conscience. He confesses that he and the other billionaires were the ones responsible for moving Nikki's body by using Camilla's paint tarps, explaining the Camilla White residue on Nikki's suit. Now, with this confession, implies Camilla as an accessory saving the building. As Jay tells Mabel that he hopes one day that she can forgive him and take that vacation with him, as all the three billionaires are now under custody. The question of who and why Nikki and Lester died, check, and the building being saved, also checked. Now upstairs, we see Sophia admitting to Charles that she used him to secure her family's future, and Charles understands why. But Sophia admits that she also still had feelings for Charles, as she invites him to go on her dream vacation with her with the money she got from the billionaires with giving them back the finger, but Charles, for the first time ever, says no to a dangerous woman. Flash forward to 3 months later, we see that Sophia and Lorraine did actually bond over losing their husbands, as Lorraine is now making her and Lester's dream come true, as she's now living in the Arconia thanks to the bag full of money given to her by Sophia. Speaking of Sophia, we cut to her living her dream in Posta Cano as she gets a call from her sons that their grandmother is dying, and we see Sophia getting her godfather moment as she says goodbye to her mother. Now we end this season finale with seeing the building with some new residents after it being saved, as we see Howard has also found a new relationship with Vinny. As we cut to our trio, who's now celebrating their 5-year anniversary of their partnership and their friendship, which all started with listening to Cinda's podcast. This new podcast by Cinda is in the UK, and it's about a girl who's gone missing with some red curly hair.
I'm Cinda Canning, and this is The Girl with the Curls. While on holiday in the UK, I found myself confronted by 2 new obsessions. A jasmine flowering tea that's become daily ritual, and a new mystery.
Suddenly, we cut to a woman with red curly hair stumbling through New York, leaving a trail of blood. She makes her way to the front gate of the building, in which we see Howard finding her, and she appears to be dead. But here's the catch. She was only inches away from technically being on the premises of the building. So that means our trio can't investigate until this mystery woman takes her last final breath and reaches out, touching the building's gate. As it is revealed, this mystery woman is Cinda, setting up season 6 of Who Killed Cinda, the woman responsible for starting the Only Murders podcast. Alrighty, y'all, we have made it to the end of the recap, so let's talk about my thoughts of the finale and the season. And I'm gonna be honest with you all, as I always am. I had some good laughs of this finale. I enjoyed moments of the finale, and as well as the season, which we'll talk about here in a second. But focusing on this finale overall, I wouldn't say I felt satisfied by how it all wrapped up. Look, it's always great to see our trio getting together and finally getting answers, but the answers themselves were a bit underwhelming for me. Now, let me be clear. This has nothing to do with my theories or you all theories not coming true. I actually love when a show doesn't go exactly the way I planned or go exactly the way I anticipated. I think that's great. But I also think for me, it's all about the execution and having this feeling that the journey that we went on this season, while it did have its fun moments, it was entertaining and all that good stuff, but the actual arrival to the destination wasn't as good as it was built up to be. The issue I had with the finale and some of the issues I had with this season were the mystery around who killed Nikki, but also who does the missing finger belong to. Just became less and less interesting as the story continued with each episode. So we start this episode by opening up with a flashback with Nikki and Sophia of them being in love and Sophia eventually falling out of love with Nikki, and I'm thinking, where was this the entire season? To me, I found Nikki to be a one-note, one-dimensional type of character with little to no character development, and the same goes with Sophia. We have her having this send-off to go on her vacation and saying goodbye to her mother. That was all built up over a few lines with her talking about her mom's relationship with Charles at dinner and seeing her getting pistachios thrown at her. I just felt the whole Nikki of it all, the Sophia of it all, the mafia thing was the most disappointing part of the finale, but also the entire season. Now, to speak on the topic of the finger. I was recently a guest on Nerds at Night with Blake, and I mentioned how this damn finger better have the best payoff ever because they've been dragging this thing on the entire season. And to get that final reveal, it was just disappointing. Now, I've seen the theories the past few weeks, and I even threw my hat in the ring revolving around the mayor being involved and it being his finger and whatnot. But seeing how it all played out, the murdering of Lester and Nikki, it was so accidental. It was just like a big accident, and it 100% could have been prevented. And it just felt like the murder this season was less about actual envy and hate. It was just, again, a very accidental situation compared to the other seasons. I just thought that all the buildup of who the finger belongs to, and then randomly throwing in the affair with no context between the mayor and Sophia, it all felt like it was added on by the writers at the last minute. Now, as you all know, I was really heavy into my robot AI being the killer theory for a while, but just thinking about the AI of it all this season, that really didn't have much of a payoff besides it playing the clip of what happened to Lester, or at least some of the story of what happened to Lester that night. Now, I don't want to just keep bashing on the season, but just to continue my disappointment with some of the elements, I loved the billionaires for the majority of the season, but even their inclusion lost momentum by the end. The whole Jay and Mabel being a love interest was just simply stupid in my eyes. I mean, just think about it. Jay lied all season to Mabel, especially about Lester, who, by the way, I remind you all, was the very first true friend that Mabel ever had, and it seemed like the show completely ignored that element of the story and made it seem more like Mabel was more interested in Jay and falling in some type of relationship with him than actually really caring about losing Lester. Again, to me, whenever Mabel has a love interest besides maybe Theo, it's always kind of underwhelming. In this season, it felt more like a TMZ era back to when they were rumored to be dating. I'm referring to Selena and Logan, and it didn't really feel authentic to the story or the characters or this season. Again, there was just so many things that just kind of felt like empty or random at this point, thinking about Lester and Lorraine having kids, but not having their kids show up at any point in the show. Loretta's apartment catching fire and not going anywhere. Oliver seemed to be hated by the staff of the Arconia, but that had no real payoff. Bash having a kid didn't really mean anything. Them having their podcast contracted came and went. Look, I don't want to crap on everything because if you go back and listen or watch my previous breakdowns, I was clearly enjoying myself, especially those earlier parts of the season. But I would say the last few episodes, including this one, again, I enjoyed some of the moments. Here's my metaphor. I enjoyed the ride to the restaurant, which we were all excited for because we were in the car with our friends. We're laughing, we're enjoying each other's company, having some good vibes. But once we actually arrived to the restaurant and once we ate the food that we've been talking about for the past 10 weeks, it just turned out to be undercooked and extremely underwhelming. But hey, I still love our trio. I'm still a fan of this show. I'm not done with this show. I just felt like the back half of the season and the finale was underwhelming. And I had to be honest with you all because I would be lying if I didn't tell you all how I really felt. Now, obviously, there's one more thing to talk about, and that's the case of Who Killed Cinda, which does have potential. Potential to take us back to the beginning where our trio first came together, and that was because of their love of her podcast. So I would hope this means the mystery behind who poisoned Oliver's dog, to all the little bits and clues that's been there about a person who's been watching and threatening them from the start, finally gets some answers in season 6. Which, speaking of season 6, at the time of this recording, it has officially been announced that season 6 is official. It is happening soon, probably sometime next year. And not only did we get that announcement, but it's also been confirmed that at least part of the season will take place in the UK. Well, there you have it. That will conclude my breakdown of episode 10 of season 5 of Only Murders in the Building. Now, before we wrap up, I have to take the time to thank you all for not only listening to this breakdown, but if you've listened to all of my breakdowns this season, and hell, all of the previous seasons, I really appreciate the continued support. I love this show. I love this community. Again, I was slightly disappointed by how everything wrapped up, but again, this is such a joy to be able to cover the show with you all, so I thank you for the continued support. If you all are still here listening, do me a favor, the secret word of the week, put in the comments right now, hashtag the house always wins. So now that I'm off my soapbox, I would love to know what you all thought of the season finale. What worked, what didn't work, what were some frustrating moments, some unanswered questions you all had, what are your anticipation level for season 6, what do you all hope to see, but also what did you all think about this overall season, and how would you rank the seasons? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, if you all enjoy my breakdown of this finale, do me a favor by hitting that like button as well as the hype button. Also, consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And last but not least, consider sticking around. Even though this is the end of the road for this season, I have other shows that I cover. Like right now, I'm going to be covering the rest of the season for It, Welcome to Derry. And there's a new Vince Gilligan show on Apple TV Plus that I'll be covering as well. So stick around, check out my movie reviews, TV reviews, and subscribe to the channel today. Now, if you all are listening to this breakdown via podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I appreciate you all. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Consider sticking around by following and subscribing to the podcast. And also leave me a review and a rating. I would appreciate it. Alrighty, y'all. Thank you again for watching today's breakdown. Hope you all enjoyed it. Stay safe. You all are awesome. And I'll see you soon.